Story 1. The evening began like any other, with the sun sinking behind the distant hills, casting a golden hue over the town. I had always been captivated by the allure of the forgotten trails, the ones whispered about in hushed tones or marked by the faintest signs. On this particular night, I felt a strong urge to explore one such path, a seldom used trail known simply as the Forgotten Path, nestled deep within the local forest. As I prepared for my journey, I packed a small flashlight, a bottle of water, and a light jacket in case the night grew cold. The air was still warm from the day's sun, but I knew the forest could offer a chill as the darkness settled in. Leaving the comforting glow of streetlights behind, I ventured towards the edge of town where the forest began, its edges darkening rapidly as night took hold. The entrance to the Forgotten Path was marked by an old wooden sign, half consumed by ivy and moss. It read "Public Trail," but the words beneath were obscured by time and neglect. The path itself was barely visible, a narrow track of dirt and leaves meandering into the dense woods. As I stepped onto it, the sounds of civilization faded abruptly, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional distant call of an owl. The canopy above was thick with old growth, branches interlacing to form a dark, tangled web that blotted out most of the fading light. My flashlight beam seemed feeble against the enveloping darkness, but it was enough to light my immediate way. The path was uneven, roots and rocks lurking as potential trip hazards, reminding me to keep my focus on the ground ahead. As I walked, the eeriness of the trail began to seep into my bones. It was quiet, too quiet. The usual cacophony of forest life seemed muted here, as if the animals themselves avoided this forgotten trail. Occasionally, a breeze would whisper through the trees, sending a shiver of leaves cascading in a hushed symphony, their rustle the only sound that filled the silence. Despite the unease, there was a soothing quality to the isolation. The complexities of daily life, the constant buzz of technology, and the relentless pace of human existence felt worlds away. Here there was only the path, the trees, and me. This solitude brought a sense of peace, a calm that I rarely experienced in my day-to-day life. About halfway through my journey, the path dipped into a small hollow. The air grew cooler, and the scent of damp earth and decaying wood intensified. I noticed small flecks of luminescence on the ground, bioluminescent fungi that glowed eerily in the darkness. They lit patches of the path in a ghostly blue-green light, adding to the surreal atmosphere of the trail. I paused to take in this natural phenomenon, marveling at how life found a way to shine even in the darkest places. It felt like a metaphor for resilience, for finding a way to thrive against odds. Inspired by this thought, I continued on, my steps more confident than before. The path eventually began to ascend slightly, the terrain changing as I moved. The trees here were older, their trunks massive and sprawling, their roots like the twisted hands of giants clutching the earth. Moss hung heavily on their branches, draping everything in a soft green veil. The air was thicker, filled with the ancient breath of the forest. As I neared the peak of the rise, I came across an unexpected clearing. It was a small, circular area where no trees grew. The sky above was visible here, a clear patch of night speckled with stars. The contrast between the dense forest and the open sky was striking. I turned off my flashlight and allowed my eyes to adjust to the natural light of the stars. The world seemed to expand around me, the universe stretching out vast and mysterious. In the middle of the clearing, there was a stone bench, worn by weather and time. I sat down, taking a moment to just be to listen to the faint sounds of the forest, to feel the gentle night air on my face, and to gaze up at the uncountable stars. Time seemed to stretch, the moment holding a weight of its own. Eventually, I knew I had to return. I stood, casting one last look around the clearing before heading back to the path. The return journey felt different, as if the forest had accepted my presence, or perhaps I had become more a part of it. The path no longer seemed as eerie, nor the silence so profound. When I emerged from the forest, the lights of the town greeted me like the distant glow of another world. The experience of walking the forgotten path stayed with me, a reminder of the beauty and mystery that lay just beyond the familiar. It was a journey that I would not soon forget, a trek through the unknown that brought me unexpectedly closer to the heart of the wild. Story 2. It was late when I boarded the last train from the city, the hands of the clock already well past midnight. The station had been bustling with the last remnants of daily commuters and city night dwellers, their footsteps echoing off the high ceilings, a symphony of goodbyes and hurried departures. But as I stepped into the train car, a surprising solitude greeted me. It was as though the world had suddenly decided to exhale, leaving me in a bubble of quiet introspection amidst the cold steel and glass. I found myself alone in the car, save for the faint hum of the engine and the distant chatter of conductors fading as they moved to other parts of the train. The seats, upholstered in a nondescript pattern that spoke of an era when design was merely functional, were empty. I chose a seat near the middle, by the window, where I could watch the world rush by in a blur of shadows and light. The train jolted forward, a gentle reminder that we were now bound to the rhythm of the tracks. The initial inertia pushed me softly against the seat, and as we gained speed, the rhythmic clacking of the rails began to assert itself. It was a sound familiar to any late-night traveler, a kind of mechanical lullaby, both soothing and monotonous. Each click and clack seemed to punctuate the night's stillness, a metronome to the passing time. As the city's lights began to thin, giving way to the sparse outskirts, the shadows inside the train car grew longer, stretching and shrinking with the passing streetlights. These fleeting visitors danced across the walls and ceiling of the car, ghostly figures in a play directed by the night itself. They moved with an elegance, swirling around the poles and seats, as if they were part of a silent ballet to which only I was privy. Looking out the window, the outside world appeared as a series of snapshots, each framed by the dark edges of the window. Buildings turned into silhouettes, their details obscured and their edges softened by the darkness. Trees rushed by in streaks of green and black, their leaves whispering secrets lost to the speed of our passage. Occasionally, a lonely car would appear on a parallel road, its headlights a pair of bright eyes in the night, racing alongside us before veering away into its own unknown narrative. Inside the train, the air was stale but comforting, filled with the scent of metal and upholstery. It was an aroma characteristic of public transport, a mixture of cleanliness and wear, of countless journeys taken and stories untold. I found myself sinking deeper into my seat, the fabric now slightly warmed by my presence. I glanced around the empty car, pondering the lives of those who had sat here before me. Who were they? What were their stories? A businessman returning late from a long day of meetings, perhaps, or a group of friends heading home from a concert, their laughter still lingering in the air. Now there was only me, my thoughts, and the night. As the train continued its journey, the tempo of the tracks seemed to change. It was subtle at first, a slight variation in the rhythm, like a skilled drummer adding complexity to a beat. This new pattern was hypnotic, and I found my thoughts drifting with the cadence. It was in this half-dreaming state that I began to feel a deeper connection to the journey itself. The train, with its powerful engine and gleaming tracks, was no longer just a vehicle but a part of a larger, living network. It was a pulse moving through the veins of the land, connected to every city, every station, every solitary late-night traveler like myself. The night deepened, and the spaces between the streetlights grew longer, plunging my car into periods of near-complete darkness. In these moments, the window reflected my image back at me, a ghostly counterpart to the shadows playing across the walls. We regarded each other, this other me and I, companions in reflection and travel. Suddenly, the train began to slow, the reduction in speed bringing a gradual end to the clacking symphony. We were approaching another station, a small one judging by the brief glimpse of a single platform and a flickering lamp. The train came to a stop with a sigh, a long exhale after a long journey, and for a moment, everything was silent. I remained seated, watching as the doors slid open to reveal an empty platform. No one boarded, and no one departed. It was a pause in the narrative, a breath taken between chapters. Then, with a slight shudder, the train resumed its journey, the doors closing with a soft thud, sealing me once again in my solitary compartment. The train's departure from the station marked the beginning of the final leg of my journey. The shadows resumed their dance, and the clacking filled the air once more, now a familiar presence. I leaned back, allowing the rhythm to cradle my thoughts, my eyes heavy with the weight of the night. As the first hints of dawn began to touch the sky, coloring it with shades of deep blue and gray, I realized that the train ride this last train had been a journey not just through space, but through time and thought. It had been a rare opportunity to disconnect from the immediacy of life and to reflect in the company of shadows and light. When the train finally rolled into my station, the early morning light spilling over the platform, I gathered my belongings with a sense of reluctance. Stepping off the train, I felt a profound gratitude for the night's journey. The platform was quiet, the world slowly awakening, and as I walked away, the sound of the train fading into the distance, I carried with me the memory of the night, the rhythmic clacking, and the dancing shadows, all etched indelibly in the narrative of my life. Story 3. The storm had taken me by surprise, its sudden arrival trapping me within the walls of the old Kessler mansion. I had come to this remote retreat to escape the bustle of city life, drawn by tales of its grandeur and solitude. Yet, as the heavens opened and rain began to lash against the ancient stones, I found myself an unwilling guest, ensnared by the weather's capricious whims. The mansion, once a vibrant estate brimming with high society's elite, now stood mostly forgotten, its glory days shrouded by time and dust. Its vast halls and numerous rooms whispered of a bygone era, each creak and groan a testament to its age. As I moved through its corridors, the echoes of my footsteps seemed to stir the house to life, as if it were greeting an old friend after years of solitude. The rain intensified, its sound a constant pitter-patter that resonated through the expansive halls and high ceilings of the mansion. It was a soothing melody, nature's own lullaby, and it brought a strange sense of comfort amidst the isolation. I found myself drawn to one of the large bay windows overlooking the estate's overgrown gardens. Here, the rain transformed the scene into a living impressionist painting, each drop blurring and blending the colors of the wild flora. As the evening drew on, the storm's fury did not abate, and the power eventually flickered and died, leaving me in the soft embrace of candlelight. The mansion, with its modern additions stripped away, reverted to its original self, a relic of the past, whispering secrets in the dim light. I lit a few candles and placed them around the room, their flames casting playful shadows on the walls. The occasional creaks of the house settling were more pronounced now, each sound amplified by the silence that enveloped the mansion. These were not merely the noises of an old building, they felt like the contented sighs of a creature settling in for the night. I couldn't help but imagine the mansion as a living entity, its breaths and murmurs a language known only to those who had dwelt within its walls for decades. To distract myself from the growing storm outside, I explored the ground floor of the mansion. My candlelight threw grotesque shadows as I moved, the light flickering against the opulent decay. The walls were lined with portraits of the Kessler family, their eyes seeming to follow me with an intensity that felt almost lifelike. Beneath these watchful gazes, the weight of history felt palpable, each portrait a reminder of the lives that had once filled these halls with laughter and conversation. In the library, I found a haven. Books lined the shelves from floor to ceiling, their spines a mosaic of fading gold letters and cracked leather. The scent of old paper filled the room, a perfume as intoxicating as any bloom from the garden outside. I selected a volume of poetry, the pages yellowed and delicate, and settled into an armchair that was worn but welcoming. Reading by candlelight, the words of long-dead poets seemed to resonate with the mood of the house, their verses echoing the rhythmic drumming of rain against the window. Hours passed in this manner, the storm outside a constant companion to my literary wanderings. When sleep finally began to beckon, I made my way to one of the upstairs bedrooms. The grand staircase creaked underfoot, a reminder of the mansion's age and the countless footsteps that had trodden here before mine. The bedroom was adorned with heavy drapes and an ornate four-poster bed. Lying there, the rain's patter against the windows lulled me into a restless sleep. Dreams came in fitful waves, filled with echoes of laughter and the soft murmur of distant conversations, ghosts of the mansion's past lingering in its present. I awoke to the sound of a particularly loud creak. The storm had lessened, its fierce energy now a mere whisper compared to the cacophony of the night before. In the dim light of dawn, the mansion felt transformed. The ominous overtones of the night had given way to a quiet peace, the morning light casting the old house in a less foreboding mood. Curiosity renewed, I ventured out to explore the mansion in the daylight. The rain had stopped, leaving the air fresh and the ground saturated with its nourishment. The gardens, wild and untamed, sparkled under a coat of droplets, each leaf and petal magnificently alive in the aftermath of the storm. As I walked through the rooms, the sunlight streaming through the windows cut through the remnants of the shadows, the mansion less a haunted relic and more a repository of stories waiting to be told. The creaks and sighs of the house now seemed like the comfortable settling of an old man into his favorite chair, content after a long night. My time at the Kessler mansion ended with the storm's departure, the roads once again passable and the outside world beckoning. As I drove away, I looked back at the grand old house, its windows bright with the morning sun. The echo of the rain and the whispers of the house had intertwined with my own story, a brief chapter in the life of an enduring monument to history. The echoes in the halls of the Kessler mansion would linger in my mind, a haunting melody composed of rain, whispers, and the timeless dance of shadows and light. Story 4. The decommissioned lighthouse on the rugged coastline had always held a magnetic allure for me. It stood as a solitary sentinel against the backdrop of the vast, unending sea. Its once bright beacon had faded into silence years ago, yet it remained a powerful symbol of guidance and safety. Tonight, driven by a sense of adventure and a yearning for solitude, I would spend the night within its weather-beaten walls. Arriving as the sun began its slow descent behind the horizon, the sky transformed into a canvas of fiery oranges and deep purples. The lighthouse, perched on a cliff, offered a panoramic view of the undulating ocean, a sight that took my breath away with its raw beauty. The path to the lighthouse was a winding trail through tufts of sea spray grass, and each step brought a crisp gust of salty air, invigorating and pure. The structure itself was taller than it seemed from a distance, its cylindrical tower stretching skyward, staunch against the ravages of time and weather. The door creaked ominously as I pushed it open, its hinges protesting after years of disuse. Inside, the air was musty with the scent of old stone and rust. I set down my backpack and flashlight, the latter's beam slicing through the darkness, catching dust motes in its glow. As night enveloped the world outside, the true isolation of the lighthouse became palpably clear. Other than the occasional cry of a distant seagull or the bark of a sea lion, there was only the relentless sound of the ocean waves. They crashed against the cliffs with rhythmic regularity, a constant reminder of the sea's untamed nature. This sound, both overwhelming and soothing, was the soundtrack to my night in this ancient place. I ventured up the narrow spiral staircase, the walls adorned with peeling paint and old maritime charts that spoke of a time when this lighthouse guided ships to safety. The steps groaned under my weight, each turn in the staircase bringing me closer to the lantern room at the top. When I reached it, the room was surrounded by glass, now streaked and foggy from years exposed to the elements. From this vantage point, the sea looked even more immense, an abyss in the moonlight. The lantern room, once home to a powerful lamp and lens, was now empty, save for the remnants of old electrical equipment and a rusted weather vane. I set up my small camp here, unrolling a sleeping bag near the glass. The wind howled outside, a ghostly wail that matched the spectral dance of moonlight on the waves. The sea, viewed from this height, was mesmerizing. Moonlight painted the crests of each wave in silver, creating a stark contrast against the deep blues and blacks of the nighttime sea. It was like watching the pulse of the planet in real time, rhythmic and alive. As the hours passed, the tide ebbed and flowed with a soothing regularity that made the passage of time feel fluid, almost dreamlike. My eyes grew heavy as I watched this nocturnal ballet of water and light. Just before slipping into sleep, a movement caught my eye. Far below, where the dark sea met the rocky base of the cliff, I thought I saw a splash larger than those made by the waves, as if something or someone had breached the surface. I strained my eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, swallowed up by the night. Sleep, when it came, was fitful. I dreamt of sailors navigating by starlight, of ships ghosting past treacherous rocks, guided safely by the light from this very tower. In my dreams, the lighthouse was alive again, its light a steady pulse defeating the dark. I woke to the pre-dawn grayness, the boundary between sea and sky barely discernible. The wind had died down to a gentle whisper, and the waves continued their ceaseless caress of the shore. Climbing down from my perch, I stepped outside to feel the fresh morning air. The sea, calmer now in the light of early dawn, stretched out before me in a gradient of blues and grays. I spent the morning exploring the small keeper's quarters attached to the base of the lighthouse. Here, the remnants of a lived life were more poignant: a rusty kettle on a stove, a pair of weathered boots by the door, a framed photograph of a smiling couple with the ocean as their backdrop. It was a glimpse into a life defined by the rhythms of the sea and the responsibilities of the light. As the sun rose higher, casting golden beams across the water, I reflected on my night in the lighthouse. There was something profoundly humbling about being so close to the vastness of the sea, under the watchful gaze of the old lighthouse. It stood as both a guardian and a witness to the timeless dance between land and water, man and nature. Packing up my belongings, I took one last look at the ocean from the top of the lighthouse. The water sparkled under the morning sun, each wave a flicker of light, the sea's vastness a reminder of my own smallness in the grand tapestry of life. As I made my way back down the path, the echo of the waves followed me, a lasting whisper in my ear. The old lighthouse, though no longer in service, had fulfilled its purpose once more. It had guided me through a night of reflection and wonder, its beacon now lit not by a lamp, but by the enduring beauty of the sea. Story 5. It was a moment of spontaneous curiosity that led me to the library's doors as the clock approached midnight. The vast building, an emblem of knowledge and silence, stood impressively against the night sky, its windows dark except for a few that spilled soft light onto the stone steps below. As a nocturnal refuge for my restless mind, the library promised a haven of peace and a touch of the mystical, surrounded by centuries of written words. The door opened with a soft murmur, a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet of the night. Inside, the main hall stretched before me, grand and imposing. The library was more than just a collection of books. It was an architectural marvel, with high vaulted ceilings and rows upon rows of towering bookshelves. The air was cool, and had the faint scent of old books, a mixture of musty paper, leather bindings, and the indefinable essence of time itself. It was a smell that evoked a sense of ancient wisdom, luring the senses into the depths of the past. With only the soft hum of the overhead lights for company, I began to wander through the aisles. My footsteps echoed lightly on the marble floor, the sound crisp and solitary in the vast hall. Each section one passed seemed to whisper secrets, the shelves dense with stories waiting to be told. Here, the books were not mere objects but vessels of lives and worlds, each spine a door to another universe. I found myself drawn to the older parts of the library where the rarest collections were kept. This section was dimly lit, the lights intentionally soft to protect the delicate pages from harm. The shelves here were encased in glass, wood polished to a soft gleam by years of careful preservation. I paused in front of a display, my eyes tracing the elegant script of a manuscript that could have been penned several centuries ago. The glass reflected a faint outline of my face, superimposed over the yellowed pages, a ghostly image melding with the text. The quiet was profound, broken only by the occasional creak of wood, perhaps the building settling, or the weight of so many books making itself known. The sound seemed almost like contented sighs, as if the books appreciated the rare moment of nighttime solitude as much as I did. I continued my exploration, each step taking me deeper into the library's heart. The further I ventured, the more the modern world seemed to fall away, replaced by the timeless realm of literature and history. I came upon a large reading room, its tables empty and chairs pushed neatly under. Here, the smell of old books was stronger, concentrated. I pulled out a chair and sat down, the wood groaning softly under my weight. On the table, a few books lay scattered, left behind by daytime visitors. I picked one up, feeling the texture of the cover under my fingers. Opening it, the pages made a soft, pleasing sound, a whisper of paper that seemed as loud as a shout in the hushed environment. I turned the pages slowly, reverently, each flip sending a tiny puff of air that carried the unique scent of old paper. Time passed unmarked by the outside world. I read passages randomly, absorbing words that spanned decades and centuries. Every so often I would stop, closing my eyes to listen. The sounds of the library at night were subtle, the faint rustle of pages, the distant hum of the city that seemed worlds away, and the soft, almost imperceptible breathing of the building itself. At some point I wandered back to the main hall, drawn by the allure of the grand windows that looked out onto the city. The night was deep now, the sky a velvet black scattered with stars, visible through the occasional break in the urban landscape. The library, a beacon of light in the dark, felt like a ship sailing through the night, a solitary but steadfast vessel. As I stood there, a sudden movement caught my attention, a shadow passing briefly across one of the high shelves. My heart skipped a beat, the thrill of the unexpected coursing through me. Could there be someone else here? A fellow night owl drawn to the sanctity of this place? I listened intently, but the sound did not repeat. Perhaps it was just another secret of the night, a momentary trick of the light, or my imagination fueled by the stories surrounding me. Reluctantly, as the clock neared the early hours of the morning, I knew it was time to leave. The outside world was calling me back, the spell of the library reluctantly loosening its grip. I walked back through the aisles, touching the spines of the books as I passed, a silent farewell to each. Exiting the library, I looked back at its majestic form. It stood silent and proud, a custodian of the past and a sanctuary from the fast pace of the modern world. The night had changed me in small, indisputable ways, deepening my appreciation for the quiet moments, the whispers of history, and the comforting solitude that only a place filled with books can offer. As I walked away, the echo of my footsteps fading, I carried with me the profound silence and the haunting beauty of the library at midnight, knowing that this nocturnal visit would not be my last. Story 6. The sharp, biting chill of winter had settled into the small town nestled at the foot of the mountains. Nights were especially cold, the kind that sank deep into your bones, turning breath into mist even within the confines of one's home. It was on one such night, as the town slept under a blanket of snow and silence, that I found an unexpected source of solace in the bathroom of my old, drafty house. I had been awakened by the cold, my room seemingly invaded by the frosty air that slipped through every nook and crack of the aging wooden structure. Seeking some semblance of warmth, I wrapped myself in a thick robe and padded softly across the cold floorboards to the bathroom. I was hoping for a respite, perhaps even a few moments of comfort from a hot shower under the dim glow of the overhead light. Upon entering, I immediately noticed how the cold had transformed the small space. The bathroom, usually just a functional area, was engulfed in a delicate, silvery fog. My first breath inside created a swirl in the mist, and with each subsequent breath, the dance continued, ephemeral and ghostly. The air was crisp, and each inhalation felt like a fresh draft of winter itself. I flicked on the light, which emitted a soft, warm glow, casting a gentle light over the frosted surfaces. The mirror above the sink, a large old-fashioned piece bordered with peeling gilt, was fogged over completely. No reflection met my gaze, only the opaque whiteness of condensed moisture. As I watched, the first tendrils of frost began to creep across the surface of the mirror. They formed slowly, almost hesitantly at first, as if the cold was experimenting with its patterns. Fascinated, I drew closer, my eyes tracing the intricate designs that nature was etching onto the glass. The patterns were dendritic, spreading like the branches of a winter bare tree or the delicate veins of a leaf encased in ice. There was a symmetry to them, a perfection that only the random hand of nature could achieve. Each line was a shimmer of crystal, a fleeting glimpse into the artistry of frost. I forgot about the shower and the warmth I had sought. Instead, I became utterly absorbed by the transformation of the mirror. With each minute that passed, more of the glass succumbed to the creeping frost, its advance silent and relentless. The chill in the room seemed to encourage the spread, each wave of cold air from the slight gaps in the window frames pushing the frost further across the mirror's face. Standing there, in the quietude of my bathroom turned winter canvas, a sense of calm settled over me. The usually unremarkable act of watching frost form became a meditative experience. My mind, often cluttered with the minutiae of day-to-day life, found clarity in the simplicity of the moment. The world outside, with all its complexities and demands, was momentarily forgotten, held at bay by the frost and fog. I breathed deeply, my exhale adding more fog to the air, momentarily obscuring the frost patterns before they reasserted themselves. It struck me then how much life is like that, a series of overlapping moments, some clear, some obscured, but each significant in its own way. The frost patterns, too, were transient, destined to disappear with the rise of the morning sun and the warmth it brought. Yet their temporary nature didn't detract from their beauty or the peace they offered. If anything, it enhanced it. Time seemed to slow, stretching out in a rare pause of appreciation. Eventually, though, the cold began to seep into my bones, urging me to move. Reluctantly, I turned on the hot water, the hiss of steam rising instantly as it hit the sink. The room filled with steam, and slowly the frost on the mirror began to retreat, each pattern melting away under the onslaught of warmth. I watched each line dissolve, the intricate branches retreating into droplets of water that slid down the glass. The mirror gradually cleared, revealing my reflection at last. There was a smile playing on my lips, a soft, serene expression that mirrored the peace I felt inside. The room warmed, and the last vestiges of frost vanished, leaving behind only a damp, clear surface. My shower was quick, the hot water a stark contrast to the chilly air I had initially embraced. Stepping out, I felt refreshed, not just from the cleanliness, but from the unexpected journey of the night. As I dried off, I glanced back at the mirror. It was clear now, reflecting the mundane reality of the bathroom. But the memory of the frost, with its delicate and fleeting beauty, lingered. Leaving the bathroom, I felt a renewed sense of appreciation for the small, often overlooked phenomena of the natural world. The frost had transformed a simple, everyday experience into a moment of profound calm and beauty, a reminder of the ephemeral nature of life and the quiet grace that can be found even in the coldest, darkest times. As I crawled back into bed, the sheets now warmed by my brief absence, I carried with me the image of the frosty mirror. In the silence of the night, with the world asleep and the snow gently falling outside, the echo of that tranquility stayed with me, a soothing balm against the long winter night. Story 7. Working the night shift at the museum wasn't everyone's idea of an ideal job, but for me it was a sanctuary. The museum, a grand old building in the heart of the city, housed centuries of history within its walls. By day, it was alive with the buzz of curious visitors, the air thick with the excited chatter of school children and the measured tones of tour guides. But at night, when the last of the staff had left and the doors were securely locked, a profound stillness settled over the vast halls and galleries. It was during these hours that the museum transformed into a completely different realm. The absence of the daytime noise made the night feel like a private viewing arranged just for me, every artifact and exhibit seeming to stand out more prominently, bathed in the soft, ambient lighting that was kept on for security. My duties as a night security guard were straightforward but vital: patrol the exhibits, monitor the security feeds, and ensure that all was as it should be. The job required vigilance, but it also afforded me long stretches of quiet that I came to cherish deeply. My rounds began in the main hall, a large, open space dominated by the skeleton of a dinosaur, its bones starkly illuminated against the shadowy backdrop. The echo of my footsteps on the marble floor was the only sound, a soft, rhythmic tapping that seemed to keep time with the beating of my own heart. This sound, paired with the immensity of the dinosaur looming overhead, created a sense of walking through a different era entirely, each step a journey further back in time. From the main hall, I moved through the corridors leading to the various themed galleries. The ancient civilizations section was always particularly striking at night. Here, golden artifacts and richly colored frescoes caught the light in ways that transformed their appearance from how they seemed in the daylight. The shadows cast by my flashlight played over hieroglyphics and pottery, giving them a lifelike quality as if the figures depicted might stir into motion at any moment. I often paused in the Egyptian exhibit, drawn by the replica of a pharaoh's tomb. Inside, the air felt cooler, the atmosphere heavy with the scent of imitation myrrh and the imagined hint of ancient dust. Standing before the sarcophagus, I sometimes spoke softly, half expecting the mummified ruler within to answer back. These one-sided conversations were whimsical indulgences of mine, a way to fill the silence with friendly chatter to a long-gone king. The art gallery was another highlight of my nightly route. Here, the paintings from lush, vivid landscapes to stark modernist pieces seemed to watch me as I passed. Their eyes, painted with such skill and depth, followed silently, sharing in the solitude of the night. It was in this gallery that the stillness of the museum felt most profound, the quiet so deep I could almost hear the brushstrokes that had created the scenes before me. Midway through the night, I would take a break in the small staff room that offered a view of the museum garden, now shrouded in darkness. The outlines of statues and hedges were just visible under the moonlight, creating a play of light and shadow that made the garden look like a scene from a Gothic novel. It was here, with a cup of coffee warming my hands, that I felt most at peace, the stillness of the museum like a blanket around me. Continuing my rounds, I ventured into the natural history section. The stuffed animals, posed in dynamic displays of frozen life, seemed almost to breathe in the dim light. A particularly realistic depiction of a tiger mid-pounce gave me pause each night. Its glass eyes caught the light in such a way that it appeared startlingly alive, its presence a stark reminder of the fine line between motion and stillness. Towards the end of my shift, as dawn began to whisper promises of light on the horizon, I made my way to the maritime exhibit. The model ships, with their intricate rigging and weathered decks, spoke of voyages long past and oceans traversed. Here I liked to imagine the sounds of the sea waves crashing and gulls crying filling the silence of the museum, the echoes of those distant waters mingling with my own footsteps. As my shift drew to a close and the first hints of daylight began to soften the darkness outside, I prepared to hand over to the day staff. The museum would soon awaken from its nightly repose, the stillness replaced by the day's energy and noise. But in those last few moments of quiet, I savored the serenity that had enveloped me throughout the night. Leaving the museum, I often looked back at the building, its imposing structure now catching the first light of day. The experience of spending the night among echoes of the past was a privilege that never grew old. Each shift was a reminder of the breadth of human history, a silent conversation between the present and the past held in the stillness of the night. As I walked away, the sounds of the city beginning to stir, the museum behind me stood as a steadfast guardian of history, its secrets safe within until the next night shift, when the stillness would once again take hold. Story 8. It was on a particularly quiet night in mid-December when I decided to take a drive through the countryside. The world around me had surrendered to a thick blanket of snow that had been falling steadily since dusk. There was something irresistibly peaceful about the snowfall, each flake drifting silently to join the others in a soft, seamless mantle that transformed the landscape into a scene from a delicate, wintry dream. The roads were mostly clear, thanks to the efforts of the local plows, but the fields and forests on either side lay untouched, pristine in their wintry attire. The soft glow of my car's headlights illuminated the way, casting an amber hue onto the snow, making it sparkle under the night sky. As I drove, the only sound was the gentle hum of the car's engine, mixed with the occasional soft crunch of snow under the tires. The usual hum of life had quieted, leaving the world around me feeling paused and hushed. The rhythm of driving was soothing, almost meditative, as I watched the endless dance of snowflakes illuminated in the beam of my headlights. The road took me past frozen lakes that mirrored the moonlight, fields dotted with the dark shapes of sleeping trees, and quaint farmhouses nestled against the cold. These homes, with their windows aglow and smoke curling up from the chimneys, seemed like warm havens in the chilly landscape. They stood as cozy contrasts to the expanse of the cold, open fields. Occasionally, a lone deer would venture close to the roadside, its form ghostly and tentative in the dim light, eyes reflecting a bright, cautious watchfulness. These brief encounters were stark reminders of the wilderness pressing in on the narrow, human-made path through the snow. Each sighting felt like a privilege, a fleeting moment of connection with the quiet inhabitants of the winter world. As I continued deeper into the countryside, the snow began to fall more heavily, the flakes growing larger, more insistent in their descent. They swirled around the car, a hypnotic spectacle that drew my eyes time and again. It was as if each flake competed for a moment in the spotlight of my headlights before settling on the ground. The effect was mesmerizing, the snowflakes not just falling but also dancing, each pirouette a silent symphony of winter's grace. Turning off onto a less traveled road, The tire tracks of previous vehicles began to fade until I was driving on a surface that was almost completely untouched. Here, the softness of the snow-covered road demanded a slower pace, and I was happy to comply, reducing speed to match the tranquil setting. The untouched snow seemed to absorb sound, amplifying the quiet, making the night even more still, more serene. The trees along this part of the road were heavy with snow, their branches bending gracefully under the weight. Every so often, a gust of wind would stir the branches, sending a shower of snow glittering through the air, a magical display of light and shadow. These bursts of snow dust were stark reminders of the dynamic nature of this quiet world, a world that was not asleep but rather waiting, alive with its own rhythms and movements. I stopped the car for a moment to take in the scene more fully. Turning off the engine, I stepped out into the cold. The silence was profound, almost tangible in its intensity. The snow muffled every sound, leaving only the soft hiss of falling flakes. Standing there, in the middle of a snow-covered road with fields stretching out on either side under a starry sky, I felt a profound sense of isolation and peace. The air was crisp and cold, biting at any exposed skin, but inside my heavy coat, I felt protected and warm. I breathed in deeply, the air filling my lungs with its icy purity. Around me, the landscape lay bathed in moonlight and snowlight, a scene that seemed not of this world but of a realm made purely of silence and light. As I continued my drive, the realization that these moments were fleeting filled me with a poignant mixture of sadness and appreciation. The winter night's beauty was transient, destined to change with the rising sun and the activities of the day. But for now it was mine to enjoy, a gift of the season, rare and beautiful. Eventually I turned the car around to head back home. The journey back was reflective, my thoughts as meandering as the road before me. I felt a deep gratitude for the night, for the winter, and for the quiet solitude that had allowed me to connect so deeply with the world around me. Reaching home, I parked the car and paused before going inside. The snow was still falling, each flake a whisper in the night. I looked back at the road, my tire tracks already disappearing under a new layer of snow, as if I had never been there at all. The ephemeral nature of it all, the tire tracks, the night, the drive seemed to echo the transience of life itself. Yet there was comfort in knowing that the winter's beauty was not in its permanence but in its momentary grace, a grace that I had been fortunate enough to witness. With a final look at the quiet street, I stepped inside, carrying the stillness of the winter night in my heart, a serene end to a peaceful drive. Story 9. At the edge of the old neighborhood, where the houses began to thin out and give way to sprawling fields, there lay an abandoned playground. It was a relic of happier times, left to the mercy of the elements in the slow but inevitable march of nature as it reclaimed what once belonged to children's laughter and joy. As dusk settled on the town, casting its orange glow in elongated shadows, I found myself drawn to this forgotten place, seeking the solitude it offered amidst the rust and silence. The air was crisp as I approached, the sun dipping low in the sky, its light filtering through the trees that bordered the playground. These trees, once mere saplings when the playground thrived, were now tall and imposing figures that watched over the aging structures with a sort of melancholic guardianship. I entered through a gap in the fence, the metal links twisted and bent, a testament to the years of neglect. My footsteps crunched on the gravel path, a sound that seemed too harsh in the otherwise still evening. The first thing that caught my eye was the set of swings. They hung unevenly, one slightly lower than the other, their chains coated with rust that flaked off at the slightest touch. I approached and pushed one gently, the creak of the metal a familiar sound that brought a wave of nostalgia. It swung back and forth with a mournful noise that seemed to echo through the empty playground, a ghostly reminder of its past. Next to the swings was the slide, its once bright blue surface now faded and streaked with rust. Leaves and debris had gathered at the base, piled up over seasons of disuse. Despite its worn appearance, the slide still held a certain allure, a symbol of simpler times when all it took to feel like you were flying was a quick rush of gravity pulling you down its slope. I continued to wander, drawn to the merry-go-round that stood in the center of the playground. It was a small circular platform with peeling paint and several metal bars for children to hold onto as they spun around. I placed my hand on the bar, the metal cold and slightly damp from the evening dew. With a push, the merry-go-round gave a groan of protest but began to turn, each rotation slower and more labored than I remembered from the days of my youth. Yet, as it moved, the familiar motion brought a smile to my face, a fleeting sense of freedom in the simple pleasure of movement. As the merry-go-round wound down, its spinning gradually coming to a stop, I noticed the seesaw. It was lopsided, one end buried in the dirt, the other pointing accusingly at the sky, as if in blame for its abandonment. Moss had begun to climb up the wooden seats, claiming them for the earth. It looked almost picturesque in its decay, a perfect subject for a painting that spoke of loss and the passage of time. I took a seat on the edge of the sandbox, now overgrown with weeds that sprouted between the grains of sand. The texture was rough under my hands, mixed with earth and leaves, but it was still recognizably a sandbox. I scooped up a handful, letting it cascade back down, each grain whispering as it fell. The shadows grew longer, and the playground became bathed in the blue hues of twilight. This transition of light seemed to soften the edges of decay, lending the place a certain ethereal quality. The creaks and groans of the equipment seemed to grow louder, more pronounced, as if the playground were speaking to me, recounting tales of the countless children who had once played here. It was in these sounds, the creak of the swings, the slow spin of the merry-go-round, the whisper of sand, that I found a profound solace. Here, in this space where human voices were absent, the language of old metal and weathered wood spoke volumes. Each noise told a story of a past life of laughter and tears, of friendships forged in days spent in carefree abandon. As the last light of day gave way to the first stars of the night, I felt a connection to this place, not just as a silent observer, but as a keeper of its memories. It seemed important somehow to acknowledge the life it had once held, to honor its role in the joys of childhood, even if those days were long gone. I stood to leave, casting one last glance over the playground. In the moonlight, it looked peaceful, almost as if it were resting, gathering strength to stand through another day. The night had transformed it, softening its dilapidation into something more resembling gentle repose. Walking back through the gap in the fence, I felt a calmness envelop me. The experience of exploring the abandoned playground at dusk had offered me a quietude that was rare and unexpectedly moving. It was a reminder that beauty could be found in the most unlikely places, and that sometimes solitude offered its own form of company. As I walked home under the starlit sky, the sounds of the playground seemed to follow me, a soft echo in my mind, both haunting and beautiful. It was a poignant reminder of time's passage, and of the moments of stillness and reflection that could be found even in forgotten corners of the world. Story 10. Nestled in a forgotten fold of the countryside where the hustle of city life seemed like a distant memory, an old wooden bridge spanned the gentle creek that meandered through a sleepy grove. It was a relic from another era, perhaps built by hands that valued the beauty of craftsmanship, evidenced by the intricate carvings on its railings and the sturdy planks underfoot, now worn smooth by the passage of time. I had stumbled upon this hidden gem during an afternoon walk, seeking respite from the monotonous drone of everyday routines. The path that led to the bridge was little more than a beaten track, lined with wildflowers and overgrown grass that whispered secrets with each brush of the wind. As I approached, the first thing that struck me was the sound of soft, melodious babble of water flowing beneath the bridge. The creek itself was a thing of understated beauty, its waters clear and lively, reflecting the dappled sunlight that filtered through the leaves overhead. Moss-covered stones sat like ancient sentinels along the water's edge, and small fish darted in the shallow depths, visible from my vantage point on the bridge. Stepping onto the wooden structure, I felt a sense of crossing into a world unmarked by time. The wood creaked softly under my weight, a comforting sound that spoke of age and stability. I walked to the center of the bridge and leaned over the railing, looking down at the creek flowing tirelessly onward. The water moved with a graceful certainty, around rocks, over fallen branches, always finding the best path forward, a natural metaphor for persistence and adaptability. The creek's song was accompanied by the rustling of the leaves, a symphony of sounds that seemed orchestrated to soothe the soul. The wind was gentle but insistent, stirring the branches of the overhanging trees, which swayed gracefully, their leaves fluttering in the breeze like green waves on an arboreal sea. The interplay of light and shadow on the water's surface created patterns that danced with an almost hypnotic quality. As I stood there, absorbed in the natural harmony around me, I noticed the details that made this spot uniquely enchanting. Dragonflies zipped back and forth across the water, their iridescent wings catching the light in flashes of brilliant color. A bird called from somewhere deep in the woods, its song clear and melodious, a lonely melody that seemed both sad and beautiful. The air around the bridge was fresh, tinged with the scent of damp earth and green leaves, a fragrance that was as revitalizing as the scene was calming. Breathing deeply, I felt the stresses of the day begin to wash away, carried off by the creek's waters and scattered by the wind in the trees. I decided to sit for a while, finding a spot where an old plank jutted out slightly more than the others, forming a makeshift bench. From here I could see both up and downstream, the creek a constant presence in my peripheral vision, its sounds a steady backdrop to my thoughts. Time seemed to slow as I sat, the world reducing to this small, serene snapshot of nature. The longer I listened to the water and wind, the more attuned I became to the subtler sounds, the occasional plop of a fish jumping, the distant rustle of an animal moving through the underbrush, the soft thud of an apple falling from a nearby tree. As the sun began to set, the light changed, casting the woods in a golden hue that seemed almost magical. The bridge, too, was bathed in this warm light, its wood glowing amber and russet. The shadows lengthened, stretching out over the water like dark fingers, while the brightest parts of the creek lit up with reflections of the sky above, now painted in strokes of orange and pink. Reluctantly, I knew it was time to leave, to return to a world ruled by clocks and calendars. But as I stood and prepared to walk back the way I had come, I took one last look at the creek and the old wooden bridge. I felt a profound gratitude for this place and the peace it had offered me, a serene escape that seemed a world away from the usual noise and chaos of life. Walking back along the path, the sounds of the creek and the wind in the trees followed me, echoes of tranquility that lingered in my ears. I carried with me not just the memory of a beautiful place, but a renewed sense of calm, a reminder that places like this existed, quiet, untouched corners of the world where one could step back, breathe deeply, and simply be. As the bridge faded from view, hidden once more by the trees and the turning path, it felt like leaving a friend, knowing that it would be there when I needed solace again, standing steadfast over the creek, a bridge not just across water but between the world and me. Story 11. It was one of those evenings when the sky had been overcast since dusk, heavy with the promise of rain. The air hung thick with anticipation, its coolness a soft whisper against the skin, carrying the scent of imminent petrichor. As darkness folded over the landscape, the first few droplets began to fall, lightly at first, like the tentative notes of a prelude to a much-awaited symphony. Inside, my bedroom was a cocoon of warmth and comfort, illuminated by the soft glow of a bedside lamp. The blankets were piled high upon the bed, inviting and plush, a stark contrast to the chill that was slowly claiming the night outside. It was the perfect setting for a night of deep, restorative sleep, made all the more inviting by the sound that began to crescendo above me, the rain tapping rhythmically on the tin roof. The house, an old cabin nestled among towering pines, had been my retreat from the world for the past several days. Its rustic charm was amplified by its age and the many stories I imagined it held within its wood-paneled walls. But of all its features, the tin roof was my favorite. It transformed every rainfall into an auditory experience, a lullaby composed by nature itself. As I settled into bed, the rain intensified, its taps growing more insistent, more confident. The rhythmic patter was hypnotic, each drop a tiny drum beat upon the metal surface. The consistency of the sound created a pattern that my weary mind gladly followed. It was as though each drop was tapping away the day's worries, cleansing the slate clean with its cool, silvery notes. Lying there, I felt a profound sense of isolation from the rest of the world, as if the cabin and I were adrift in a vast, aqueous expanse. The pines that encircled the house swayed under the weight of the downpour, their branches whispering secrets to one another, a sibilant chorus to accompany the steady drumming on the roof. The coolness of the room was a gentle reminder of the world outside. The window, slightly ajar, allowed the fresh, moist air to seep in, mingling the earthy scent of rain-soaked soil and pine with the room's warmer tones of wood and fabric. This blend of aromas was comforting, a sensory affirmation of shelter and security against the elements. My thoughts began to drift, lulled by the ambient symphony of rain and wind. Memories surfaced fleetingly, images of rainy days past, moments spent under umbrellas or dashing from cover to cover, the laughter of friends soaked to the skin. Each memory was washed over by the sound of the rain, softened and smoothed like pebbles in a stream. As the night deepened, the intervals between my thoughts grew longer, the edges of my consciousness blurring into the soothing soundscape. The rain's rhythm became more varied, a dynamic arrangement that played with intensity, now a gentle tapping, now a vigorous drumming. This variability was not disruptive but rather enchanting, each shift a gentle nudge deeper into relaxation. The bed, with its soft sheets and the weight of warm blankets, seemed to embrace me. My eyelids grew heavy, each blink longer than the last, as the tin roof continued its steady serenade. In this state of half-sleep, the sound of the rain was a comforting constant, a reminder that I was here, safe and warm, while the world outside refreshed and renewed itself. Periodically, a gust of wind would sweep across the roof, changing the timbre of the rain's music. It was as if the wind were a conductor, directing the tempo and volume of the rain's performance. These moments were exhilarating, adding a frisson of excitement to the otherwise serene night, only to return to the comforting regularity of gentle taps and patters. And somewhere in the depths of the night, the distinction between wakefulness and sleep blurred completely. The rain on the tin roof had woven a tapestry of sound so intricate and absorbing that it filled all the spaces of my mind, a soft, persistent drumming that promised a night of deep sleep and the peace that comes with being cocooned from the world's cares. In this timeless night, dreams came easily, flowing seamlessly from the tranquil reality of my rain-filled sanctuary. They were vivid and comforting, infused with the essence of the rhythmic rain that continued its gentle assault on the roof above. Morning came softly. The rain had ceased, leaving in its wake a silence that felt full and complete. The light that filtered through the curtains was soft and gray, the world outside washed clean and dripping with the remnants of the night's downpour. I lay in bed for a few moments longer, savoring the stillness that the rain had left behind, its final gift. As I finally rose from bed, the sense of rest and rejuvenation was palpable. The night of listening to the rain on the tin roof had been more restorative than I could have imagined. The simplicity of the experience, of merely lying and listening, had provided a respite that felt both luxurious and utterly necessary. Walking to the window, I opened it wider, letting in the crisp morning air. The earth smelled fresh, invigorated by the night's showers. The trees looked greener, more alive, their leaves glistening with droplets that caught the light like tiny prisms. The memory of the rain song lingered in my mind, a soothing echo that I knew would call me back to this place whenever the world became too much, too loud. For now, though, I was content to stand and watch the new day unfold, grateful for the night's symphony and the timeless lullaby of rain on a tin roof. Story 12. The moon hung low and full, a luminous orb casting its silver glow over the deserted beach, creating a pathway of shimmering light that seemed to beckon one towards the horizon. Miles away from the nearest town, the beach lay untouched and serene, its usual daytime bustle replaced by the soothing tranquility of night. Tonight, it belonged to Nathan, who had come seeking solitude and the kind of peace that only the sea could offer. Nathan stepped out of his car, the gravel crunching softly underfoot. The air was cool, carrying the briny scent of the ocean mixed with the faint, earthy aroma of damp sand. He paused at the start of the sandy path that led down to the beach, taking a deep breath, letting the unique fragrances fill his senses and cleanse his mind of the day's worries. With each breath, he felt lighter, more present in the moment. As he descended the wooden stairs to the beach, the sound of the ocean grew louder, a constant whispering crash of waves that spoke of the vast, unfathomable expanse beyond the shore. The beach was wide and long, stretching miles in either direction, its sands untouched by footprints, except for those left by seabirds during the day. Once on the sand, Nathan removed his shoes, feeling the cool grains between his toes, a natural massage that soothed as he walked. The sand was damp beneath the surface, packed hard by the tide, providing a firm yet yielding path. He started walking south, following the moon's reflection on the water, the rhythmic sound of the waves guiding him like a metronome for his thoughts. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like a handful of diamonds thrown across velvet. Occasionally a breeze would rise, carrying with it the cooler air of the ocean, causing the loose ends of Nathan's light jacket to flutter slightly. The solitude was complete, enveloping, not a soul in sight, not a sound but the natural music of water meeting land. Nathan's mind wandered as he walked. He thought about his life, the paths he had chosen, and those he had yet to tread. The beach at night seemed like the perfect metaphor for his thoughts, vast, a bit mysterious, and filled with the potential for discovery. Each step took him further into his reflections, the moonlight guiding him just as it illuminated the way ahead. He stopped occasionally to look out at the water, watching how the waves formed far out at sea and grew as they neared the shore, cresting before they broke with a gentle ferocity. It was mesmerizing, this endless cycle of build-up and release, and he found it oddly comforting. It was a reminder that life too had its ebbs and flows, its moments of quiet building and dramatic revelation. The further Nathan walked, the more he felt disconnected from his daily life and its incessant demands. Here, with the sand beneath his feet and the vast ocean beside him, his problems seemed smaller, less urgent. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for this moment of peace, for the beauty of the world that continued its rhythm, regardless of human concerns. At one point he came across a piece of driftwood, a large, gnarled piece that had been smoothed by the ocean. He sat down, using it as a makeshift bench, and watched the waves for a while. The moon was higher now, its light casting a broader, more brilliant sheen across the water. The tide was coming in, the waves creeping closer to where he sat, their sounds more pronounced, more intimate. As he sat there, Nathan felt a connection to something larger than himself, something timeless. The ocean had been here long before him and would continue long after he was gone. It was a humbling thought, yet it filled him with a profound sense of belonging to the larger cycle of nature, of life. Eventually, he rose and resumed his walk, not wanting to return to his car just yet, eager to prolong this experience. He walked until the beach started to curve, the shoreline leading back towards the land, signaling the end of this stretch of sand. Turning back, Nathan retraced his steps. He felt refreshed, as if the walk had washed away some of the residual heaviness he'd carried with him to the beach. The moon still shone brightly, his faithful companion in the sky, and he felt a quiet camaraderie with the celestial body. By the time he reached the stairs leading back to the parking area, the eastern sky was beginning to hint at dawn, a pale blue that promised the arrival of a new day. Nathan felt ready to face whatever challenges it might bring, fortified by his night walk on the beach. Climbing into his car, he took one last look at the beach, the waves, and the moon. He knew he would come back, maybe not soon, but eventually. The beach at night had offered him a sanctuary, a place where he could find peace and perspective. As he drove away, the sounds of the ocean faded into the background, but the sense of calm it had instilled in him remained, a lasting gift from a night spent walking under the moonlit sky. Story 13. Under the celestial tapestry of the night sky, my garden becomes a secret world of shadows and whispers, where the moonlight dances across dew-kissed leaves, and the air is filled with the earthy scent of soil and blossoms. It's a place where time slows, and the hustle of the day fades into the tranquil embrace of nocturnal solitude. This is my sanctuary, my retreat, where I become the night gardener, tending to my plants under the soft glow of the moon. As the last rays of the sun dip below the horizon and twilight deepens into night, I step into my garden with a sense of purpose and peace. The tools of my trade, a watering can, a pair of shears, and a small trowel, are carried out with almost ceremonial reverence. They are my companions in this nightly ritual, extensions of my hands as I work silently among the rows of fragrant herbs and vibrant flowers. The first task is always watering, a soothing activity that rhythmically marks the start of my gardening. The gentle sound of water spilling from the can seems louder at night, each droplet resonating as it hits the dry earth or the thirsty leaves. The plants seem to sigh in relief, their leaves perking up as moisture soaks into the roots. I move methodically from one plant to another, my shadow merging with the darkness, only occasionally outlined by the silvery light of the moon. As I water, I listen to the subtle sounds of the night. The rustle of leaves in the gentle night breeze creates a soft symphony that complements the solitude of my endeavors. Occasionally, a night creature stirs, a fox rustling through the underbrush or an owl hooting from the old oak tree at the edge of the property. These sounds do not startle me. Instead, they deepen my connection to this nocturnal world, reminding me that I am not alone in my appreciation of the night. After watering, I inspect each plant for signs of distress or disease. My eyes have adjusted to the dim light, and in the moon's pale illumination, I can discern the nuances of each leaf and stem. I prune a dead leaf here, support a sagging stem there, always working with a gentle hand. The tactile sensation of the soil, cool and moist beneath my fingers, is grounding, connecting me directly to the earth. The peaceful solitude of the night allows me to focus deeply. There are no distractions, no sounds of human activity to pull me from my contemplation. It is just me, the plants, and the night. This solitude is not lonely but enriching, filled with the presence of living things growing silently around me. Each night in the garden reveals new surprises, buds that have opened, fruits that have ripened, insects that come to pollinate and feed. Midway through my tasks, I often pause to take a stroll along the garden path. The moon casts playful shadows that shift and change as clouds drift across the sky. The light filters through the branches of trees, creating patterns on the path that feel like stepping through a different realm, a world where magic could very well be real. The air is fresher here, filled with the mingled scents of jasmine and rose, mint and basil, a natural perfume that is intoxicating and revitalizing. During these walks, I reflect on the growth of my garden, recalling the effort and care that have brought it to this point. Each plant tells a story, from the seedlings I nurtured in early spring to the mature plants that now fill the space with life and color. My garden is a living tapestry, woven from countless moments of care and attention, each thread a critical part of the whole. As the night progresses, I sometimes sit on a bench under the apple tree, its branches heavy with ripening fruit. From this vantage point, I can see the entire garden spread out before me, bathed in moonlight. It's a sight that fills me with a profound sense of accomplishment and peace. Here, in the quiet of the night, I feel a deep bond with nature, a harmony that transcends the everyday. The rustling of the leaves brings me back from my reverie, a reminder of the ever-present life all around me. This sound, constant and soothing, is like a conversation among the plants, a secret dialogue about the mysteries of the night. I listen, letting the peaceful rustle calm my thoughts and deepen my connection to this place. Eventually, the eastern sky begins to lighten, a subtle shift that signals the approach of dawn. The stars fade one by one, overtaken by the soft blue of the early morning sky. My time as the night gardener draws to a close, and I gather my tools, cleaning and storing them away with the same reverence with which I brought them out. As I leave the garden, walking back to the house with the first light of dawn casting long shadows behind me, I carry with me the tranquility and satisfaction of the night's work. The garden, now entrusted to the care of the daytime, seems to sleep a peaceful, contented sleep, nurtured by the loving hands of the night gardener. This routine, repeated with the cycle of the moon, is not merely about tending to plants. It is a ritual of connection, reflection, and peace, a cherished communion with the quiet earth under the watchful eyes of the stars. Story 14. Perched atop the crest of a rugged mountain peak, Lucas sat alone beside a small tent, the crisp mountain air whispering secrets of the high wilderness. He had hiked all day to reach this solitary summit, navigating rocky paths and dense forests to find this perfect spot for a night under the stars. Now, with the sun having dipped below the horizon hours ago, he was enveloped in the profound silence and awe-inspiring beauty of the night sky. The journey to the summit had been grueling but exhilarating. Starting at dawn, Lucas had packed his gear into his trusty backpack, lacing up his hiking boots with a sense of anticipation that tingled through his veins. The path had taken him through varying landscapes, from leafy woodland groves filled with the chirping of birds to steep, rocky inclines that tested his endurance and skill. Every step brought him closer to his goal, and with each meter ascended, the air grew cooler and the scenery more spectacular. As he reached the summit, the day began to wane, the sun casting golden hues across the sky. Lucas set up his camp quickly, pitching his tent on a flat spot that offered a panoramic view of the surrounding mountains and valleys. With his campsite secure, he prepared a simple meal over a small portable stove, the smell of cooking food mingling with the earthy scents of pine and cold stone. With nightfall, the true spectacle began. As the last light of day faded, the sky transformed into a canvas of deep indigo, sprinkled liberally with stars. Lucas zipped up his jacket against the night's chill and stepped out from the shelter of his tent to fully appreciate the vista. The stars seemed to multiply by the second, the Milky Way painting a luminous band across the celestial sphere. Lucas felt an overwhelming sense of smallness, a lone human observer amidst the vastness of the universe. The stars shone with a clarity and abundance seldom seen from the valley floors, unmarred by light pollution. Constellations that he had only read about in books or seen in apps stood out with startling clarity, telling their ancient stories in the silent language of light. He spent hours outside, his neck craned back, a pair of binoculars hanging from his neck. With these, he scanned the heavens, identifying celestial bodies and satellites, occasionally spotting a shooting star and making silent wishes. The quiet of the mountain was profound, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind or the distant call of a nocturnal animal, a sound that made the night feel even more alive. Around him, the landscape was ghostly, illuminated by starlight and the faint glow of his camping lantern. Rocks and twisted trees cast long shadows, and the air was crisp with the scent of moss and cold stone. Lucas felt as though he had stepped into another world, a place untouched by time, where the night sky ruled supreme. At one point, he pulled out a map of the constellations and laid it on a flat stone, using it to guide his exploration of the sky. He located Polaris, the steady North Star, and traced the outline of Ursa Major and Minor. Further south, he marveled at the constellation Orion, noting the red hue of Betelgeuse and the bright gleam of Rigel. This celestial tour was not just an exercise in astronomy, it felt deeply spiritual. Alone on the mountain, Lucas felt a connection to something larger than himself, a sense of peace that filled him with awe and gratitude. It was as if the stars were old friends, each twinkle a nod of recognition, a whisper across the cosmos. As midnight approached, the temperature dropped further, and Lucas finally retreated into his tent. Inside, wrapped in a warm sleeping bag, he lay back with his thoughts, the stars still visible through the tent's open flap. The experiences of the day replayed in his mind, from the physical exertion of the climb to the emotional uplift of the night's watch. Sleep came slowly as he lay there, the quiet of the mountain wrapping around him like a thick blanket. In his dreams, he wandered among the stars, each step light as air, each breath a gust of cosmic wind. Morning arrived all too soon, the eastern sky tinged with the first light of dawn. Lucas emerged from his tent to witness the sunrise, a spectacular show of colors as the sun peeked over the distant horizon, bathing the world in a warm, golden light. The stars faded as the sky brightened, their nightly watch ending as another day began. As he packed up his camp, Lucas felt renewed, as though the night under the stars had recharged him in ways he hadn't anticipated. The trek down the mountain would be long, but he carried with him the memory of the night sky, a memory that would remain etched in his mind as a reminder of the beauty and vastness of the world. Descending back to the world below, Lucas felt a profound sense of gratitude. The mountain had offered him not just a physical challenge, but a spiritual refuge, a place to reconnect with the universe and himself. And as he left the summit behind, he knew he would carry a piece of that starry night with him, always. Story 15. On the edge of a serene lake, hidden by a dense copse of pines and brush, there lay a small cave known only to those who dared to wander off the beaten path. It was a secluded spot, almost magical in its quiet solitude, where nature whispered old secrets carried through the breeze that danced across the water. One late autumn afternoon, as the golden hues of the dying sun lit the sky with fiery colors, I found myself drawn to this hidden sanctuary, compelled by tales of its tranquil beauty and the mysterious sounds of water that were said to resonate within its depths. The journey to the cave was a trek through untamed wilderness. The forest floor was littered with the crisp remnants of fall leaves, and the air was filled with the earthy scent of damp wood and moss. Each step was cushioned by the carpet of foliage, the rustle of my movements a soft chorus that added to the ambience of the forest. As I approached the lake, the trees began to thin, revealing glimpses of water shimmering like a sheet of glass, undisturbed and perfect. The cave itself was nestled inconspicuously against the lake's edge, its entrance partly obscured by hanging vines and overgrowth. It was smaller than I had imagined, a mere slit in the rocky facade that required a stoop to enter. But once inside, the cave opened up into a wider chamber, the walls arching overhead in jagged patterns sculpted by time and the elements. The air inside was markedly cooler, a welcome respite from the mild warmth of the early evening outside. The immediate change in atmosphere was striking. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of mineral-rich water and the earthy dampness that spoke of enclosed spaces rarely touched by sunlight. My footsteps echoed softly as I ventured deeper, the sound bouncing off the stony surfaces and creating a layered melody of echoes that gave the illusion of depth and vastness beyond the cave's true size. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, aided by the small flashlight I carried, the walls around me came alive with colors and textures. They were wet, glistening under the beam of the light, adorned with streaks of mineral deposits that painted natural murals in hues of red, orange, and shimmering silver. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like jagged chandeliers, each drop of water that fell from their tips catching the light as it plummeted to the ground, adding to the small pools that dotted the floor. The sound of dripping water was constant, a soothing backdrop that seemed to pulse with a rhythm all its own. Each droplet created a tiny, melodic splash as it met the water below, the sounds echoing around me in a gentle cadence. It was a natural symphony, one that played on the strings of the tranquil ambience, crafting an atmosphere of peace and introspection. I found a rock near the center of the cave and sat, turning off my flashlight to let the darkness envelop me. The cool air brushed against my skin, the sounds of water and the occasional distant call of a bird from outside the cave melding together to create a sense of isolation from the outside world. Here, in the darkness, the boundaries of time seemed to blur, the outside world fading away until there was nothing but the here and now. The echoes in the cave played tricks on my senses, making it seem as though the sounds were coming from great distances, only to be followed by the realization that they were close, perhaps only a few feet away. This interplay of sound and space was disorienting yet strangely calming, as if the cave itself was altering my perception of reality, drawing me deeper into its embrace. After a time, I turned the flashlight back on and stood, exploring the small nooks and crannies of the cave. In some places, the rock formations created narrow passageways that led to other, smaller chambers. These were even more secluded, cut off from the main chamber, where the silence was so profound it felt almost tangible. The walls in these recesses were smoother, worn down by water over millennia, their surfaces cool and slightly slippery to the touch. The exploration brought a sense of adventure, a reminder of the youthful joy of discovering hidden places, where every turn might reveal something new and wondrous. Yet, despite the thrill of exploration, it was the peaceful solitude of the cave that drew me in the most. The way the sounds of water could be both present and distant, the cool air that seemed to hold a hint of mystery, the darkness that felt both enveloping and protective, it was a unique experience that connected me to the natural world in a profound way. Eventually, the waning light outside signaled the approach of evening, and reluctantly I knew it was time to leave. As I made my way back to the entrance, I paused, looking back at the chamber that had been my retreat from the world. The echo of my footsteps faded as I stepped out into the twilight, the sounds of the cave receding behind me, leaving a lingering trace of serenity in my mind. The walk back through the forest was quiet, the canopy above silhouetted against the sky now painted with the deep blues and purples of dusk. When I finally emerged from the trees and looked back, the cave was once again hidden from view, its secrets kept safe until my next visit, when I would once again seek the soothing echo of water dripping in the cool, damp air of my hidden sanctuary by the lake. Story 16. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the landscape, Evelyn stepped onto the cobblestone path that meandered through the heart of the old village. The village was deserted, an echo of a once thriving community now lost to time and memory. Buildings, made of stone and aged wood, lined the path, their windows dark, doors shut, all silent witnesses to the slow passage of time. Evelyn was drawn to places like this. There was a certain beauty in the quiet desolation, a story told in every cracked stone and creeping vine that had taken over the nooks and corners of the buildings. The village, she knew, was called Elmswood, a place that had once been bustling with life, but had slowly dwindled as residents moved to more prosperous areas or bigger cities, chasing the promise of a better life. As she walked, the only sounds were her footsteps on the cobblestones and the soft rustling of leaves in the gentle evening breeze. The light was fading fast, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that gradually deepened to purple. The air was cool, a reminder that despite the dying light, the night would bring its own chill. Evelyn paused to look at the nearest building, a small cottage with a thatched roof that was now mostly moss and wildflowers. The door was slightly ajar, swaying slightly with the wind. Curiosity drew her closer, and she pushed the door open with a gentle creak. Inside, the air was musty with disuse, but the remnants of a life once lived were still evident. A table, 2 chairs, a small fireplace now filled with ashes and the remnants of long burnt logs. On the wall hung a faded photograph of a smiling couple, the owners perhaps, or their ancestors. Leaving the cottage, she continued her walk, her eyes drawn to the details around her, the way the ivy clung to the walls, the wildflowers that had sprouted between the stones of the path, the soft murmur of a nearby brook that had once powered the village mill. The mill itself stood by the brook, its wheels still, covered in moss and ivy, the water passing quietly beneath it. Evelyn imagined the village in its heyday, the sound of children playing in the streets, the smell of bread baking in ovens, the conversations and laughter of villagers gathered in the small pub at the end of the street. Now, the pub was just another silent building, its sign swinging gently with peeling paint that once proudly proclaimed the Oak and Lantern. She wandered into the small church that stood on a slight rise overlooking the village. Its doors, unlike those of the other buildings, were solid, closed firmly. However, a small side door was unlocked, and she slipped inside. The interior was dim, lit only by the last rays of the sun filtering through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the stone floor. The pews were lined up neatly, the altar at the front was bare, and the air was heavy with the scent of old wood and candle wax. Sitting in one of the pews, Evelyn closed her eyes, soaking in the silence, the sanctity of the space. It felt as if the church, despite its emptiness, still held a sacredness, a spirit that had not been entirely abandoned. When she finally stood, the quiet was so profound that her footsteps echoed as she walked down the aisle. Leaving the church, Evelyn felt a deeper connection to Elmswood, moved by its lingering spirit. She took a path that led her around the back of the village, where small gardens had once been tended with care. Overgrown now, they still bore the marks of their past life. Rose bushes run wild, apple trees heavy with fruit that fell to the ground, untasted and rotting. The path circled back to the village center as the last light of the day faded, and the first stars began to appear in the twilight sky. Street lamps, long unlit, cast ghostly shadows on the ground. Evelyn stopped in the village square, where a worn fountain stood silent, no longer flowing with water. The stone figures of the fountain, a boy and a girl holding a basket of fruit, were worn smooth by years of weather and touch. Here in the center of the village, Evelyn felt the weight of all the lives that had crossed this square, all the moments of joy and sorrow that had been witnessed by the silent buildings. It was a living history, a memory of the past that held on, despite the quiet and the decay. As night fully took hold, Evelyn turned back toward the path leading out of the village. The stars were bright overhead, a clear night sky that watched over Elmswood, perhaps the same stars that had watched over it for centuries. Walking back to her car, parked at the edge of the village, she felt a profound sense of peace. The visit to Elmswood was more than just a walk through a deserted village. It was a journey through time, a connection to a past that, though faded, still whispered through the crumbling stone and wild gardens. Evelyn knew she would return, drawn by the beauty of the desolation and the quiet history that breathed through every part of Elmswood. Story 17. Nestled on a quiet street corner, the watchmaker's shop stood as if frozen in time, a quaint relic amidst the modern hustle of the city. The storefront was modest, with faded gold lettering spelling out E, Morley's timepieces, across the window, through which an assortment of clocks and watches were displayed. Each piece, from ornate grandfather clocks to delicate wristwatches, promised a story, a journey through time encapsulated within gears and springs. As I pushed open the heavy wooden door, a small bell tinkled above, announcing my entry into a world ruled by the meticulous measure of seconds, minutes, and hours. The air inside was filled with a symphony of ticks, each clock adding its voice to a layered chorus that resonated softly throughout the room. The sound was comforting, a gentle, rhythmic reminder of the passage of time, steady and unrelenting. The shop was dimly lit by a series of small lamps that cast warm pools of light over the countertops and workbenches cluttered with tools and parts of clocks waiting to be brought back to life. The walls were lined with shelves that held an array of timekeeping devices, each one meticulously cleaned and polished to a sheen. The atmosphere was infused with a scent of oil and metal, a tangible reminder of the craft that breathed life back into each piece. Behind a high counter, the watchmaker, Mr. Morley, worked intently. His hands were steady and sure as they maneuvered tiny gears and springs into place. He was an elderly man, with silver hair and glasses that perched on the tip of his nose. Despite his age, his eyes were sharp, reflecting a mind as precise and ordered as the watches he repaired. "Good afternoon," he said without looking up, his attention fixed on the intricate components spread before him. "Feel free to look around. Let me know if something catches your eye." Grateful for the invitation, I wandered deeper into the shop, drawn to the various clocks that populated every corner. There were grandfathers that reached nearly to the ceiling, their pendulums swinging solemnly. Mantel clocks of mahogany and marble chimed the quarter hours with a series of melodious notes that added a harmonic depth to the ongoing ticking. In one corner stood a particularly fascinating piece, a floor clock encased in dark oak, its face ornately decorated with moons and stars that moved in concert with the hands. I stood watching it, mesmerized by the cosmic dance, the gentle ticking a backdrop to my reverie. It was as if the clock itself was a portal to another era, each tick a step further back in time. Curious, I leaned closer to examine a small collection of pocket watches displayed under a glass dome. Each was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, their faces engraved with initials and dates, hinting at stories and lives long past. I imagined them once residing in the pockets of gentlemen and ladies, witnesses to both mundane daily routines and momentous historical events. As I explored, Mr. Morley continued his work, occasionally pausing to peer through a magnifying glass or to wind a completed watch and listen intently to its heartbeat. The shop was a living museum, a testament to the art of watchmaking and to Mr. Morley's dedication to preserving this art. After some time, I approached the counter, curious about the tools and parts that surrounded the watchmaker. "These are beautiful pieces," I commented, gesturing to the clocks around us. Mr. Morley looked up, his face breaking into a smile. "Thank you," he replied. Each one has its own character, its own history. They've come from far and wide, and it's my job to ensure they continue to measure time accurately. He then picked up a small, intricate device from his workbench. This is a chronometer from the early 1900s, used by mariners to navigate the seas. It's a remarkable piece of engineering. His fingers caressed the metal casing with reverence, a testament to his deep appreciation and understanding of his craft. I listened, fascinated as he described the precision required in his work, the challenges of finding replacement parts for rare pieces, and the satisfaction of restoring a broken clock to working order. Each story he told was infused with a passion for his craft that was as palpable as the ticking that filled the room. Encouraged by his openness, I asked, "How did you come to be a watchmaker?" "Mr." Morley set down the chronometer and leaned back in his chair, his eyes reflecting a flicker of nostalgia. "My father was a watchmaker before me," he began. "This shop was his, and some of my earliest memories are of sitting right here at this counter, watching his hands work magic on what I thought were just bits of metal and springs. Over time, I learned that they were much more. They were keepers of time, of history. He taught me everything. And when he passed, I took over." His story was a bridge from the past to the present, a lineage of skill and dedication passed down through time. It was clear that this shop was more than just a business to him, it was a legacy. As the afternoon waned into evening, I realized I had spent hours in the shop, lost in the world of timekeeping. I thanked Mr. Morley for sharing his stories in his shop with me, promising to return. Stepping out into the street, the modern world felt oddly disjointed after the timeless realm of the watchmaker's shop. The gentle ticking had imprinted itself in my mind, a soothing echo that reminded me of the persistent, quiet passage of time. In the watchmaker's shop, time was not. Story 18. The heavy wooden doors creaked on their ancient hinges as Ava pushed them open, stepping into the dim interior of the old theater. It was an imposing structure, one that had stood the test of time, nestled in the heart of a forgotten district of the city, where modernity had seemingly passed it by. Ava had always been fascinated by historic buildings, their stories, their secrets, and the theater, known simply as the Grand, was no exception. As she entered, the musty scent of dust mixed with old wood and fabric filled her nostrils, a smell that spoke of decades of disuse and decay. The air was cool and slightly damp, adding a tactile layer to the building's aged atmosphere. The foyer was grand, with high ceilings adorned with fading frescoes and intricate plasterwork that was now cracked and peeling. Ava paused to let her eyes adjust to the dim light filtering through the dirty stained glass windows, their once vibrant colors dulled by years of neglect. With a mixture of reverence and excitement, Ava made her way towards the main auditorium. The heavy red velvet curtains that once proudly displayed the entrance were now threadbare and moth-eaten, hanging limply from their rods. Pushing them aside, she stepped into the auditorium itself, her footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. The theater was a cavernous space, designed to hold hundreds of spectators in its heyday, rows of seats, upholstered in what once must have been luxurious red velvet, now faded and torn, fanned out from the stage, ascending in steep tiers to the back of the room. The seats creaked ominously as Avie walked down the aisle, touching the backrest gently, imagining the people who once sat there, dressed in their finery, applauding the performances. The stage itself was a grand affair, albeit one that bore the marks of time and disrepair. The wooden floorboards were scuffed and stained, remnants of sets long since removed. Ava climbed the few steps to the stage, feeling a thrill as she stood where countless actors and performers had once stood, facing an invisible audience filled with anticipation. She walked across the stage, her movements stirring up small clouds of dust that danced in the shafts of light streaming through the holes in the roof. The scenery backdrops were rolled up and stacked against the walls, their paints cracked and faded. Props were scattered about a broken chair, a dusty chandelier, a faded fake bouquet of flowers, each a relic from a different production, a different era. Ava's exploration took her to the wings of the stage, where the darkness seemed to swallow the light. Here, the scent of mustiness was stronger, mingled with the faint smell of grease paint and a hint of mildew. She found old dressing rooms along the sides, their mirrors cracked and their bulbs long burnt out. Costumes hung on racks, their fabrics brittle and discolored, the sequins and beads that once sparkled under the stage lights now dull and lifeless. Despite the dilapidation, the theater was alive in a way that Ava could feel palpably. It whispered its history to her, each whisper a story of triumphs and failures, of joys and sorrows. She could almost hear the echoes of applause, the nervous footsteps of actors backstage, the director's tense whisper calling for quiet before the curtain rose. Ava ventured into the orchestra pit, an area that once held musicians and their instruments, now silent and empty. Sheet music still lay on some of the stands, the notes blurred and smeared by water damage. She imagined the swell of music filling the theater, the vibrations of sound resonating through the air, as tangible as the wood and fabric that surrounded her. Feeling a connection to the past, Ava sat in one of the front row seats looking up at the stage. The theater, despite its state, was magnificent. It was a monument to art and culture, a vessel that held memories of a time when entertainment was both a craft and a ritual. Sitting there alone, enveloped by the shadows and the quiet, she felt a profound sense of timelessness. As the light began to fade, turning the inside of the theater into a palette of grays and deeper shadows, Ava's thoughts turned to the people who had made this place their own. The actors, directors, stagehands, musicians, and patrons each had contributed to the life of the theater, a life that had not completely extinguished despite the building's current state. Eventually, Ava arose from her seat and took one last look around. There was a beauty in the decay, a dignity in how the old theater held its ground against the passage of time. It deserved to be remembered, to be honored, and Ava felt privileged to have walked its aisles and stood on its stage. As she made her way out of the auditorium, back through the moth-eaten curtains and the peeling frescoes of the foyer, she felt a sense of melancholy that she was leaving a part of herself behind. But she also felt a spark of hope, a desire to share the story of the grand, to perhaps see it restored, or at least remembered. Stepping out into the cool evening air, the door closing with a final creak behind her, Ava carried away the whispers of the theater, the echoes of its past, stored safely in her heart. The grand, majestic, and solemn stood silhouetted against the dusk sky, a guardian of history, waiting for the next curious soul to discover its hidden stories. Story 19. Perched atop a gentle knoll, the old windmill stood as a sentinel of time, its blades etched against the vast expanse of the sky. This windmill, a relic from a bygone era, had been converted into a quaint, rustic retreat, perfect for those seeking solitude away from the bustling noise of city life. I had chanced upon it while searching for a unique getaway, drawn by the allure of its history and the promise of peace that seemed to radiate from its very structure. The journey to the windmill was a trek through winding country roads lined with hedgerows and wildflowers, the landscape gradually opening up to reveal rolling fields and finally the windmill itself. As I approached, the sound of the blades cutting through the air became audible, a steady, rhythmic whooshing that grew louder with each step. It was a sound both alien and familiar, reminiscent of distant ocean waves continually breaking against the shore. The windmill's exterior was weathered yet well maintained, with wooden shutters painted a soft blue and ivy creeping up along its stone base. The entrance was at the back through a small, arched wooden door that creaked charmingly upon opening. Inside, the windmill felt like stepping back in time. The circular interior was surprisingly spacious, with the ground floor serving as a living area. A spiral staircase in the center led up to a loft-style bedroom, positioned just below the mechanism that powered the blades. After settling in, I decided to explore the interior workings of the windmill. The machinery was a marvel of old engineering, with large wooden gears and metal fittings all working in harmony to harness the wind's power. The turning of the gears produced a gentle clattering that complemented the whooshing of the blades, creating a symphony of sounds that was both calming and mesmerizing. As dusk fell, the wind picked up, and the sound of the blades became more pronounced. I sat on a small sofa near the window, tea in hand, and listened to the hypnotic sound. It was meditative, the repetitive nature of the sound allowing my thoughts to drift freely, untethered from the usual demands of daily life. The blades sliced through the air with a steady cadence, each turn signaling the passing of time in a place seemingly untouched by its rush. The windmill's interior was warmly lit by lamps that cast soft shadows against the curved walls, the light flickering slightly with the fluctuating power generated by the windmill itself. This interplay of light and shadow, sound and silence, created a cocoon of serenity that seemed to envelop the entire space. Night in the windmill brought a deeper sense of isolation and tranquility. Lying in the loft bed, I could hear the wind howling outside, a reminder of nature's proximity and power. The sound of the windmill blades cutting through the gusts became a lullaby, lulling me into a deep, restful sleep. It was a unique experience, the feeling of being cradled by the wind, secure in the ancient structure that had stood against countless storms and seasons. Waking up to the sunrise was another enchantment. The first light of dawn streamed through the small windows, casting beams of light that slowly crept along the curved walls. The sound of the blades, now more subdued as the wind calmed with the morning's peace, continued to be a soothing presence, a constant in the ever-changing landscape. Spending the day around the windmill, I took walks in the surrounding fields, the blades occasionally visible through the trees, their motion a comforting reminder of my temporary home's constant energy. The area was teeming with wildlife, and the air was fresh, filled with the sense of grass and earth. Each return to the window felt like coming home, the sound of the blades a welcome greeting. Meals were taken at the small dining table by the window, the view of the landscape outside ever-changing yet consistently beautiful. The simple act of reading became a delight, each page turned to the backdrop of the windmill's rhythmic whooshing. The windmill, despite or perhaps because of its continual motion, was a place of profound stillness and reflection. It offered a chance to disconnect, to listen not only to the sound of the wind but also to the quieter voice within. The days I spent there passed in a slow, satisfying procession, marked not by the clock but by the cycle of wind and weather. As my time at the windmill drew to a close, I felt a reluctance to leave. The constant, comforting sound of the blades, now so familiar, seemed like an old friend. Packing up, I knew that the memory of the windmill would stay with me, a reminder of the peace that can be found in simplicity and the rhythmic sounds of nature. Driving away, I rolled down the windows, letting the fresh air fill the car. Glancing back, I saw the windmill standing resilient on the hilltop, its blades cutting through the air, strong and sure. It was a farewell scene, but also a lasting invitation to return, a promise of peace always waiting just where the road ends and the sky begins. Story 20. In the late afternoon, as the sun cast its golden hues over the sleepy suburban neighborhood, Emma climbed the narrow, creaking stairs to the attic of her grandparents' old house. The attic door groaned softly as she pushed it open, unleashing a wave of musty air thick with the scent of old wood and forgotten things. Emma paused for a moment, taking in the scene before her rows upon rows of dusty boxes, some stacked precariously, others laid out neatly, all shrouded in the soft, diffuse light filtering through the small, grimy window. This attic was more than just a storage space, it was a treasure trove of memories, each box a chapter from her grandparents' past, each object within a story waiting to be told. With a sense of reverence and anticipation, Emma began her exploration, her hands slightly trembling as she opened the first box. Inside, she found an assortment of black and white photographs, their edges curled and yellowed with age. As she sifted through them, the faces of unknown relatives looked back at her, their expressions frozen in time. There was a picture of a young woman standing proudly beside a brand new automobile, her smile wide and hopeful, a symbol of a new era. Another photo showed a family picnic, with a group of children playing under the watchful eyes of their parents, the scene a snapshot of simpler times. Emma carefully set the photographs aside and delved deeper into the box, her fingers brushing against the fabric of an old quilt. She unfolded it gently, revealing a patchwork of vibrant colors, each piece a fragment of a garment once worn, now sewn together in a mosaic of family history. Emma could almost feel the loving hands of her great-grandmother, piecing the quilt together by the flickering light of an oil lamp, each stitch a testament to her dedication to her family. Next, she opened a smaller box, one that rattled with the sound of metal and glass. Inside, she discovered a collection of old kitchen utensils, a rusty set of scales, a handful of tarnished silver spoons, and a set of delicate teacups, each with a different floral pattern. These were the tools of daily life, once held by hands that prepared countless meals, that stirred and tasted, and served with love. As the sun began to set, casting longer shadows into the attic, Emma found herself drawn to a particularly worn-out box labeled simply "Memories." Inside, there was an assortment of objects that seemed to have no particular value to anyone but those who had kept them, a small, leather-bound diary, its pages filled with neat, cursive writing, a collection of postcards from cities and towns long since visited, and a small, hand-carved wooden box containing a lock of blonde hair tied with a ribbon. Emma opened the diary and began to read, her eyes tracing the words of her grandmother as a young girl. The entries spoke of everyday occurrences, school lessons, new dresses, dances, and first loves. Emma felt a connection to her grandmother she had never experienced before, a link that transcended time and space. It was as if she could hear her grandmother's voice, light and full of youthful excitement, echoing through the years. Further into her exploration, Emma discovered her grandfather's old fishing gear, rods, reels, and a battered tackle box. She could almost see him by the riverside at dawn, the mist hovering over the water, a picture of peace and contentment. This gear was a part of his ritual, his escape into the tranquility of nature, a passion he had mentioned often, but which had seemed like just another story until now. By the time she reached the last few boxes, the attic was bathed in the soft glow of twilight. The final box contained a collection of old records and a small, portable records player. Emma set it up carefully and placed one of the records on the turntable. As the soft strains of a classic jazz tune filled the attic, the air seemed to shimmer with the laughter and voices of past gatherings, of dances and songs shared between friends and family. Sitting amidst the boxes and memories, Emma felt a profound sense of connection to her grandparents and their lives. The attic, with its layers of dust and history, had transformed from a mere storage space into a bridge between generations, a tangible link to the past. As night fell and the last light faded from the sky, Emma carefully repacked the boxes, each item now imbued with new meaning. She felt a responsibility to preserve these memories, to keep the stories alive for future generations. With a final glance around the now familiar attic, Emma turned off the record player, its last notes lingering in the air as she descended the stairs, carrying with her the stories and spirits of her family's past. Her visit to the attic had started as a simple exploration, a way to pass a quiet evening. It had turned into a journey of discovery and connection, a profound reminder that in every object, no matter how mundane, there lies a story, a piece of history, a part of a life lived. As she closed the attic door behind her, Emma felt enriched, touched by the past, and grateful for the unexpected journey through her family's history. Story 21. It was well past the usual dinner hour when I found myself pushing open the door to a quiet, nearly empty diner on the edge of town. The neon sign flickered slightly, casting a warm red glow that spilled out onto the dark, damp sidewalk. Inside, the diner was a capsule of time, untouched by the rush of the modern world outside, with chrome trimmings and booths lined in red leather, each one a cozy haven from the chilly night air. The soft jingle of the bell above the door announced my entrance, barely audible over the gentle strains of jazz floating through the air. The music was soft but clear, a saxophone's melancholy wail mingling with the light clink of cutlery and the low hum of a conversation from a booth tucked away in the corner. The dim lights hung from the ceiling, casting pools of warm light that flickered off the polished surfaces, creating a comforting, mellow atmosphere. I chose a booth near the back, sliding into the seat with a view of the entire diner. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with a kind face and a neatly pinned-up bun, approached with a smile, her pad ready in one hand. "Good evening, Han. What can I get you tonight?" Her voice was as soft and welcoming as the diner itself. "Just coffee for now." "Thanks," I replied, settling into the booth. She nodded and padded off to fetch the drink, her movements unhurried. Alone in my booth, I leaned back against the leather, taking in the quiet scene. The diner, with only one other occupied table, felt like a sanctuary from the relentless pace of daily life. The waitress returned with a steaming mug of coffee, placing it gently on the table in front of me. "Let me know if you need anything else," she offered, then retreated behind the counter, leaving me with my thoughts in the soft backdrop of jazz. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, the heat seeping into my fingers, comforting in its intensity. Sipping the bitter brew, I allowed the ambience of the diner to envelop me. The music shifted to a slower, softer tune, the piano's gentle notes floating through the air like a soft sigh. The sound seemed to weave itself into the very fabric of the place, each note a thread in the tapestry of the quiet, late-night atmosphere. Across the room, the other patrons, a couple who seemed lost in their own world, spoke in hushed tones. Their words were indistinct, but their laughter occasionally punctuated the air, a soft sound that spoke of shared secrets and quiet joy. I felt an unobtrusive connection to them, fellow night owls seeking refuge in this warm, glowing space. The diner's interior, from the checkered floor to the vintage posters on the walls, seemed to tell stories of decades past. Each object was meticulously cared for, each surface polished to a shine, reflecting the pride of those who worked there. The counter, lined with stools that rarely saw occupants at this hour, gleamed under the overhead lights, the chrome sparkling. As the night deepened, the flow of time seemed to slow within the diner's walls. The world outside might rush towards tomorrow, but here, time lingered, savoring each moment. The soft click of the waitress's shoes against the tile as she moved to refill my coffee cup was a grounding sound, a reminder of the simple routines that mark our days. I thanked her for the refill and turned my attention back to the window, where the reflections of the diner's interior lights danced across the glass. Outside, the occasional car passed by, its headlights briefly illuminating the diner's exterior, casting fleeting shadows across the floor. The solitude of dining alone was not a mark of loneliness, but a moment of peace. It was a chosen solitude, a space to breathe and to be present with oneself. The diner, with its soft music and dim lights, was a comforting embrace, a place to rest the soul before continuing on life's journey. After a while, I ordered a slice of pie apple the waitress recommended, homemade and just out of the oven. When it arrived, the aroma was tantalizing, the filling still bubbling slightly under the golden crust. I savored each bite, the sweetness of the apples and the flakiness of the pastry a delightful contrast to the robust coffee. As I ate, I thought about the people who had sat in this booth before me, about their stories and what might have brought them here. Like me, perhaps they were drawn by the promise of a quiet spot to reflect, or maybe they sought companionship in the soft murmurs of other late-night visitors. Eventually, it was time to leave. I paid my bill, leaving a tip for the waitress, who wished me a good night with a warm smile. Stepping out into the cool night air, I felt refreshed, as if the diner had not only fed my body but also nourished my spirit. Walking away, I glanced back at the diner, its lights a beacon in the night. The sound of the jazz music was still faintly audible as the door swung shut behind me, the notes lingering like a gentle reminder of the tranquility I'd found inside. The diner, a solitary figure on the landscape of the town, continued its quiet vigil, waiting to offer solace to another weary traveler in need of refuge in the late hours of another night. Story 22. In the hushed ambience of the early morning, Julia's studio was a sanctuary of calm and creativity. As she stepped inside, the soft light of dawn filtered through the large, north-facing windows, casting a gentle, diffused glow across the room. The air was cool and smelled faintly of linseed oil and turpentine, scents that mingled with the earthy aroma of rain-dampened earth coming through the slightly open window. This place, with its high ceilings and walls cluttered with sketches and paintings, was more than just a workspace. It was a realm where Julia found peace and purpose. The painting she was currently working on stood on the easel, a large canvas that captured an abstract concept of the ocean. It was still unfinished, the colors vibrant against the white, the edges raw and untamed. As Julia donned her smock, her gaze lingered on the canvas, considering her next moves. The ocean scene was inspired by her last visit to the coast, where the vastness of the sea and the rhythm of the waves had left a profound impression on her. With a deep, steadying breath, Julia picked up her palette, already dotted with globs of color from the previous day's work. She added fresh paint, cobalt blue, ultramarine, and a touch of titanium white. Her brush stirred the colors gently, blending them on the palette into the perfect shade that captured the essence of a wave cresting, the foam catching the light. The first brushstroke was always the most cathartic. The bristles touched the canvas, the paint adhering to the fabric in a satisfying smear that started the transformation of thought into art. Julia's hand moved with confidence, guided by an eye trained to see the interplay of light and color. Each stroke added depth and motion to the scene, the blues and whites dancing together, mimicking the ebb and flow of the sea. As she painted, Julia lost herself in the rhythm of her movements. The world outside her studio receded, leaving only the sound of her brush swishing softly against the canvas. This sound, rhythmic and hypnotic, was like a meditation, her thoughts quieting until there was nothing but the present moment and the creation unfolding before her. Time seemed to bend and stretch. Julia worked methodically, stepping back occasionally to view the painting from a distance, squinting her eyes to better see the balance of colors and form. Her mind was clear, focused solely on the act of painting. The problems and worries of everyday life, bills to pay, emails to answer, calls to return, all faded away, leaving a sense of tranquility that she found only in her art. The painting slowly came to life under her skilled hands. The abstract ocean began to pulse with energy, the colors vivid and moving. Julia mixed a new color, a deep stormy gray, to add contrast and depth to the scene. This color would represent the shadows beneath the waves, the unseen depths of the ocean. She applied it sparingly, mindful that too much could overwhelm the lighter, more vibrant tones. As the morning wore on, the sunlight shifted, changing the way it illuminated her canvas. Julia adjusted her position, moving her easel slightly so that the light would continue to fall evenly across the surface. The changes in natural light were subtle but crucial, affecting how she perceived her colors and shapes. By midday, the painting was nearly complete. The ocean scene was as tumultuous and alive as the sea that had inspired it. Yet, something was still missing, a final touch to bring the entire piece together. Julia paused, her brush hovering over the palette as she considered her next move. It was a crucial decision, one that could define the final mood of the painting. Her eyes caught a small tube of bright vermilion red, a color she hadn't planned to use, but now it seemed essential. With a small brush, she added a few touches of red, like the reflections of a setting sun on the water, a contrast to the cool blues and grays. It was a risk, but as she stepped back to view the effect, she knew it was the right choice. The red added a new dimension, a warmth that complemented the cool tones perfectly. Finally satisfied, Julia cleaned her brushes and palette, setting them aside. She stood before the canvas, taking in the completed work. The painting was a representation of not just the sea, but also her inner journey, calm yet dynamic, peaceful yet powerful. As she left the studio, turning off the lights and closing the door behind her, the sense of peace and accomplishment stayed with her. The studio, with its smell of paints and solvents, and the unfinished painting, now complete, were reminders of the tranquility and satisfaction that came from her craft. This was her escape, her passion, and her comfort, a place where she could translate her visions and emotions into visual poetry, where each brushstroke was a word in the silent language of art. Story 23. The night had settled like a soft shawl over the city, and I found myself drawn to the solitude of a hidden garden, nestled at the heart of an otherwise bustling urban landscape. As the clock chimed midnight, I slipped through the wrought iron gate, its hinges whispering a welcome. Here, away from the glare of street lamps and the cacophony of traffic, I entered a world seemingly suspended in time, where the moon cast a gentle glow and shadows danced softly among fragrant blooms. The air was cooler here, touched with the fresh, moist scent of dew-laden grass. As I ventured deeper into the garden, the soft earth underfoot seemed to yield with each step, welcoming me into its secret life. The paths, bordered with neatly trimmed hedges, meandered through an enchanting landscape of flower beds and ancient trees, their branches stretching toward the sky like outstretched fingers. My first stop was a small rose garden, meticulously maintained, with roses of every imaginable color blooming under the moon's watchful eye. The fragrance was overwhelming, a heady mix of sweet and tart notes that filled the air with each gentle breeze. I paused here, closing my eyes to breathe in deeply, allowing the scent to saturate my senses. Each variety of rose seemed to compete for attention, yet together they created a harmony of fragrances that could only be appreciated fully under the cover of night. Continuing my stroll, I encountered a patch of jasmine, their small white flowers glowing ethereally in the dim light. The scent of jasmine was purer, more intoxicating by night, a piercing sweetness that seemed almost tangible. I brushed my fingers against the delicate blossoms, and the petals were cool and soft, releasing their perfume as if in gratitude for the gentle touch. The path curved onward, leading me to an herb garden. Here the sharp aromas of lavender, rosemary, and mint cut through the floral sweetness, bringing with them a freshness that cleared the mind and invigorated the spirit. I rubbed a sprig of lavender between my fingers, the essential oils lingering on my skin, a reminder of nature's potent beauty. As I wandered, I was drawn to the soft, splashing sound of a small fountain located at the garden's heart. Surrounded by a circle of lilies, The fountain spilled water from the mouth of a stone cherub, a playful addition to this midnight haven. The water's melody provided a tranquil soundtrack to my journey, its consistency a stark contrast to the ever-changing scents that drifted through the air. Beyond the fountain, the garden became wilder, less tamed by the hands of gardeners. Here, wildflowers reigned, a riot of colors swaying gently in the night breeze. Their fragrance was less intense, a subtle blend of green and earthy tones that spoke of untamed nature. The ground here was covered in soft moss and scattered pine needles, cushioning my steps and releasing a sharp, clean scent with each footfall. The deeper I ventured into the garden, the more it seemed to envelop me, the plants and trees forming a green labyrinth that felt worlds away from the concrete and steel of the city beyond its borders. Here, in this scented sanctuary, time seemed malleable, stretching out in a luxurious array of moments that lingered, suspended in the air like the delicate scent of orchids, which I found in a quiet corner of the garden, their exotic perfume a sudden, surprising delight. Each section of the garden offered a new olfactory experience, from the earthy musk of freshly turned soil to the citrusy undertone of bergamot leaves in a nearby shrubbery. The variety was endless, the combinations of scents as complex and intricate as any perfume, yet all crafted by nature's hand. Eventually, I found myself in a secluded part of the garden, dominated by a grand old oak tree. Its massive branches were draped in Spanish moss that swayed silently in the night air. Beneath the oak, the air was cooler. The scents mingled with that of old wood and moss, a perfume no human art could replicate. Sitting down on a wrought iron bench under the oak's expansive canopy, I took a moment to reflect on the journey through this midnight garden. Each plant, each flower had shared its essence with me, a gift of fragrance that felt as intimate as a whisper. The garden at midnight was not merely a visual experience, but an olfactory voyage that had the power to evoke emotions and memories, a serene exploration of nature's complexity. The moon was lower in the sky when I finally rose from the bench, the night moving imperceptibly towards dawn. As I made my way back to the garden's entrance, the first hints of morning mingled with the nocturnal scents, creating a new tapestry of aromas. It was a reminder that the garden was a living entity, its scents evolving with the passage of time, never static, always growing and changing. Stepping out of the garden gate, the urban noises gradually reclaimed their space in my awareness, the magical solitude of the garden becoming a cherished memory. The fragrance of the garden, however, lingered on my skin and in my hair, a tangible link to the beauty and tranquility I had experienced. The garden at midnight was more than just a place, it was a journey through the senses, a reminder of the profound beauty of the natural world, even in the heart of the city. It was a revelation, an intimate encounter with the quiet pulse of the earth, one that I would carry with me long after the scents had faded into the morning air. Story 24. As the first tendrils of dawn crept across the sky, Sam zipped up his jacket against the cool, early morning air and headed out to his favorite fishing spot by the lake. The world was quiet, save for the occasional chirp of a waking bird or the distant rustle of a woodland creature stirring in the underbrush. It was these early hours, when the rest of the world still slumbered, that Sam cherished most a sacred time that belonged only to nature and him. The path to the lake was familiar and comforting under his boots, a well-worn trail bordered by whispering pines and stoic oaks that stood as silent sentinels in the dim light. As he approached the water's edge, the lake appeared, shrouded in a thick mist that hovered over the surface like a ghostly veil. The air was crisp, filled with the earthy scent of damp foliage and the fresh, tangy smell of the lake water itself. Sam set down his gear near a rocky outcrop that served as a natural jetty. He assembled his fishing rod with practiced ease, threading the line through the guides with deft fingers chilled by the morning air. With a final check to ensure the knot at the hook was secure, He selected a lure from his tackle box, a tried-and-true spinner that had never failed to attract the lake's more elusive residents. Casting the line with a smooth, practiced motion, he watched as the lure arced through the air before landing gently on the water's surface, sending out ripples that disturbed the mist momentarily. Then all was still again, the lure disappearing beneath the surface, leaving only the faintest trace of its entry. Sam settled back against a moss-covered rock, his rod held loosely in his hands, his gaze fixed on the spot where his lure had sunk. The lake was perfectly serene, its surface an unbroken mirror reflecting the gray light of the early dawn. Above, the mist hung low, mingling with the smoke like tendrils of cloud that streaked the sky, blurring the line between water and air. The quiet was absolute, a rare and profound silence that felt almost tangible. Every so often a fish would surface, breaking the calm with a gentle splash before disappearing into the depths again. These brief disturbances served only to enhance the tranquility, each concentric ripple a reminder of the life teeming below the serene exterior. As the sun rose higher, its light began to penetrate the mist, sending shafts of gold slicing through the gray. The air warmed slightly, the chill of the night receding as daylight asserted itself. Sam watched as the landscape transformed, the sun's rays illuminating the droplets of moisture that clung to the leaves and grasses, turning them into a myriad of tiny, twinkling stars. With the warmth came a soft breeze, stirring the mist into lazy swirls that danced across the lake's surface. Sam could feel the sun's warmth on his face now, a gentle heat that soothed and invigorated. He breathed deeply, filling his lungs with the clean, fresh air, feeling the peace of the moment settle into his bones. Time seemed irrelevant, measured only by the natural rhythms of the environment, the gradual lifting of the mist, the strengthening light, the occasional call of a loon in the distance. Sam remained patient, his line still in the water, his eyes enjoying the changing scene as much as they watched for the telltale tug of a fish. Suddenly there was a sharp pull, a sudden tension that jerked him from his reverie. Instinctively, his hands tightened on the rod, his body automatically adjusting to the weight and pull of a fish on the line. With careful, measured movements, he began to reel in, the line cutting through the water, the rod bending under the strain. The fight was brief but exhilarating, the fish a worthy opponent. When it finally broke the surface, splashing and writhing in the light, it was a beautiful, sleek bass, its scales glinting like silver in the sun. Sam netted it carefully, admiring its vitality and strength before gently removing the hook and releasing it back into the lake. Watching it swim away, he felt a surge of gratitude for the fish, for the fight, for the morning, and for the lake. As the mist finally cleared and the full beauty of the lake revealed itself under the light of a now clear sky, Sam began to pack up his gear. The morning's catch had been modest, but it wasn't the fish that mattered. What he carried home was something far richer in inner calm, a renewed appreciation for the simple beauty of the world, and a deep, abiding peace that would sustain him until his next early morning visit to the lake. By the time he made his way back down the path towards home, the sun was high, the air filled with the sounds of a world fully awake. Yet in his heart, the serenity of the lake lingered, a quiet space of stillness and mist that he could return to whenever the noise of everyday life grew too loud. Story 25. On a rain-slicked Tuesday evening, with the city cloaked in a persistent drizzle that muffled the usual clamor of urban life, I found myself stepping into the sanctuary of an old cinema. Known amongst locals as the Grand Lumiere, it was a place seemingly forgotten by time, a relic of the golden age of film nestled between more modern facades on a narrow side street. The marquee above, half lit and flickering, announced a night of classic silent films, a fitting homage to an era when cinema was a nascent art form, full of experimentation and wonder. The promise of escape into black and white worlds, where emotions were conveyed not through dialogue but through exaggerated expressions and dramatic gestures, felt particularly comforting against the backdrop of a dreary night. As I pushed through the heavy, velvet-draped doors, a wave of warm, buttery air enveloped me, mingling with the musty scent of old carpet and wooden seats. The lobby was deserted, save for the elderly ticket seller who nodded knowingly as I approached, his smile a crack in his otherwise stoic demeanor. "Evening show. You've got the whole place to yourself," he said, his voice a raspy whisper that seemed to reverence the quiet of the cinema. Ticket in hand, I made my way to the grand auditorium, my footsteps muffled by the lush red carpet that had seen better days. The room was vast, with rows upon rows of seats fading into the dimness. I chose a spot in the middle, the ideal vantage point from which to immerse myself in the flickering light of the projector. The projector whirred to life, its mechanical purr a soothing prelude to the night's escapades. As the lights dimmed further, the screen illuminated, transporting me to a bygone era where the drama unfolded in shades of gray, accompanied by the plaintive piano notes of the soundtrack, resonating through the speakers with a clarity that belied their age. The first film was a tale of love and betrayal, featuring a dashing hero and a damsel in distress. The exaggerated motions, the frantic chases, the moments of tender closeness all were rendered in a dance of light and shadow, the actors' faces conveying every nuance of emotion. The absence of spoken dialogue meant that each movement, each glance had to tell the story, and I found myself leaning forward, engrossed in the narrative unfolding silently before me. Between the reels, as one film gave way to the next, a comedy, this time full of slapstick humor and improbable situations, I took in the ambience of the cinema. The ceiling, once opulent with golden frescoes, now showed signs of wear, the gold faded to a dull yellow. But the grandeur of the past lingered, in the ornate patterns of the walls and the sweeping curves of the balcony overhead. In the flickering light that spilled from the screen, the cinema seemed alive, a living entity that breathed in the celluloid dreams of its long history. The empty seats around me were not just vacant spaces, they felt imbued with the ghostly echoes of past viewers, each one a silent companion sharing in the communal act of movie watching. The whispered lines of the films, displayed in ornate script on title cards, were like secrets being passed from the screen to the audience. I read each one silently, my voice joining those of viewers decades past, a chorus of spectators spanning generations. The gentle rustle of the reel as it approached its end, the soft clack as the projector was paused during real changes, these sounds punctuated the night, markers of time passing in the dark. As the evening wore on, the boundary between the films and my surroundings seemed to blur. The laughter from the screen mingled with the imagined laughter of a full house. The chases seemed to echo through the aisles, the characters' plight resonating within the cavernous space of the auditorium. Sitting there, in the heart of the silent cinema, I was not merely an observer but a participant in a ritual as old as the films themselves. Finally, as the last film wound to a close, a dramatic piece, full of grand gestures and poignant moments, the reality of the empty cinema settled back around me. The screen went dark, the projector sighed its last, and the house lights slowly brightened, revealing the faded elegance of the grand Lumiere in full. Rising from my seat, I felt as though I was stepping out of a dream, the shadows and light of the silent films still dancing before my eyes. I walked up the aisle, each step resonant with the history of the cinema, each echo a whisper of the countless stories that had unfolded both on the screen and in the seats of this old theater. Outside, the rain had ceased, leaving the air fresh and the streets glistening under the street lamps. The city, with its incessant pace and modern clamor, awaited me. But as I walked away from the grand lumiere, the magic of the silent films, the flickering light, and the whispered lines lingered, a gentle reminder of the power of cinema to transport, to transform, and to transcend. Story 26. Liam climbed the last few steps of the stairwell, the door above him slightly ajar, allowing slivers of the night sky to beckon him onward. With a gentle push, he emerged onto the rooftop, the cool night air greeting him like an old friend. The city sprawled below him, its myriad lights twinkling like terrestrial stars, a muted symphony of distant traffic and the occasional siren serenading the night. He had come up here to escape, to find solace in the vastness of the night sky, a contrast to the cramped, frenetic pace of his day-to-day life in the city. The rooftop was an oasis of quiet high above the incessant buzz, a place where he could lay back and gaze upward, losing himself in the infinity above. With a deep breath, Liam walked to the center of the rooftop, where he had previously stashed a worn but comfortable blanket. He spread it out carefully, smoothing the wrinkles against the rough texture of the rooftop floor, then lay down, his hands folded behind his head as a makeshift pillow. Above him, the sky was a canvas of deep velvety blue, speckled with countless stars, each one shimmering with its own secret light. From his vantage point, the city seemed a different world entirely. The sounds of urban life were distant, almost surreal. The honks of cars, the distant clatter of a late-night train, the faint hum of nightlife, these sounds were all there, but softened like echoes in a dream. It was the perfect backdrop to the celestial show above, providing just enough grounding to remind him of where he was without overpowering the peacefulness of the moment. Liam's eyes adjusted to the darkness, and the stars began to pop out one by one, as if shy performers on a cosmic stage, gradually gaining confidence. He recognized a few constellations Orion with his belt, the Big Dipper pointing northward, and Cassiopeia with its distinctive W shape. Each constellation was like an old friend, their reappearance a comforting reminder of the cyclic nature of the universe. As he watched, a shooting star streaked across the sky, its brief trail of light sparking a sense of wonder. Liam felt a surge of something primal and awe-inspiring, a connection to the vastness of the universe that was both humbling and exhilarating. He made a wish, a tradition from childhood that he couldn't quite let go of, even though the rational part of him knew better. The rooftop under the stars was Liam's retreat, his sanctuary where time seemed to slow down. Here, he could think, reflect, or choose not to think at all, simply existing in the moment, a speck under the vast universe. The problems and stresses of his daily life, deadlines, meetings, the constant buzz of his phone seemed trivial from this perspective, petty human concerns under the timeless watch of the stars. His mind drifted to thoughts of the cosmos, of galaxies spinning, of planets orbiting distant suns. He thought of the people who had looked up at these same stars centuries ago, their lives so different yet moved by the same sense of wonder. It connected him to humanity in a profound way, this shared experience of gazing upward, pondering our place in the universe. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. The night deepened, the stars climbing their arc across the sky, the constellations shifting slowly as the earth turned. The air grew cooler, and Liam pulled the edges of the blanket up around his shoulders, cozy in his little nest. The city's sounds dwindled as the night wore on, the bustle giving way to the quieter sounds of the early hours, less frequent, more subdued. Occasionally, the distant laughter of night revelers reached his ears, a reminder of the life bubbling below. It was comforting, this blend of solitude and distant companionship, like being alone in a crowd where no one demands anything of you. Finally, as the first hint of dawn tinged the eastern sky with a pale, gray light, Liam knew it was time to head back down. He folded his blanket with a sense of reluctance, a desire to stay suspended in this in-between space where the city met the sky. but he also felt refreshed, his spirit soothed by the quiet hours under the stars. Climbing down the stairwell back to his apartment, the sounds of the city began to reassert themselves, the early morning clatter of garbage trucks, the first buses of the day groaning into motion. Yet, the peace from the rooftop lingered, a serene counterpoint to the awakening chaos below. Back in his apartment, as he prepared for the day ahead, Liam carried with him the stillness of the rooftop under the stars. The memory of the night sky would be with him, a calming presence in the back of his mind, ready to be revisited whenever the noise of the world grew too loud. In this way, the stars were not just lights in the sky, but beacons of tranquility, guiding him through the day-to-day, reminding him of the vastness, the beauty, and the quiet wonder of the universe. Story 27. Underneath the sprawling canopy of the ancient oak tree, time seemed to slow to a crawl, allowing one to immerse themselves fully in the timeless embrace of nature. The massive trunk, weathered and knotted with age, stood as a silent sentinel, its branches reaching out like the arms of an old friend, offering solace to those who sought refuge beneath its boughs. As I settled onto the soft carpet of moss that blanketed the forest floor, the scent of earth and foliage enveloped me, drawing me deeper into the tranquil embrace of the grove. Sunlight filtered through the dense foliage above, casting intricate patterns of light and shadow upon the verdant landscape. With each breath, I could feel the pulse of life all around me, from the gentle rustle of leaves to the distant chatter of wildlife. It was as if the entire forest was alive, teeming with energy and vitality, each creature playing its part in the intricate tapestry of existence. Closing my eyes, I allowed myself to be transported by the symphony of nature, letting go of the worries and cares of the outside world. In the stillness of the grove, I found a sense of peace that eluded me amidst the chaos of modern life, a reminder of the simple joys that lay waiting to be discovered in the natural world. As I sat in quiet contemplation, I couldn't help but marvel at the sheer magnitude of the ancient oak tree before me. It stood as a living monument to the passage of time, its gnarled branches reaching skyward in silent defiance of the centuries that had come and gone. I imagined all the stories it could tell, all the lives it had witnessed, from the first sapling that took root in the fertile soil to the countless generations of flora and fauna that had called its branches home. It was a living link to the past, a connection to a world that existed long before humanity ever set foot on this earth. Lost in reverie, I began to notice the subtle nuances of life that flourished in the shadow of the ancient oak. Insects buzzed lazily through the air, their iridescent wings catching the sunlight as they flitted from flower to flower. Birds sang melodious tunes from their perches high above, filling the grove with the sweet sound of their music. A squirrel darted across the forest floor, its bushy tail twitching with nervous energy as it searched for food among the fallen leaves. Nearby, a family of rabbits emerged from their burrow, their soft fur glinting in the dappled sunlight as they frolicked in the grass. With each passing moment, I felt myself drawn deeper into the intricate web of life that surrounded me, my senses alive with the sights and sounds of the forest. It was a world untouched by the chaos and noise of civilization, a sanctuary where time seemed to stand still. As the afternoon sun began to sink towards the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the landscape, I reluctantly rose from my place beneath the ancient oak tree. Though my time in the grove was over for now, I knew that its memory would stay with me, a source of comfort and inspiration in the days to come. With a final glance back at the majestic oak, I turned and made my way back towards civilization, grateful for the brief respite it had provided. For in the heart of the forest, beneath the shade of the ancient oak tree, I had found a glimpse of something truly magical, a connection to the natural world and to the timeless rhythms of life itself. Story 28. The night market. Walking through a closed night market, I absorbed the lingering scents and sights of the day's commerce. The sun had long since dipped below the horizon, casting the bustling street into a soft, ethereal glow. It was a time when the vendors had packed up their wares, leaving behind remnants of their day's labor. Yet the essence of the market still lingered in the air, a tapestry woven with the aromas of exotic spices, sizzling meats, and freshly baked goods. As I strolled down the narrow alleyways, the silence enveloped me like a comforting blanket. The cacophony of bargaining voices and the clinking of coins had been replaced by a serene tranquility. It was as if the market itself had taken a deep breath, exhaling the frenetic energy of the day and embracing a moment of stillness. My senses were heightened in the absence of the usual hustle and bustle. I could hear the gentle rustle of leaves overhead, the distant hum of cicadas, and the occasional flutter of wings as birds settled in for the night. Each step I took echoed softly against the cobblestone pavement, a rhythmic cadence that seemed to harmonize with the pulsating heartbeat of the city. The stalls that had once teemed with life now stood empty, their wooden shutters drawn closed like eyelids heavy with sleep. Yet they retained a quiet dignity, as if awaiting the dawn when they would once again burst into vibrant activity. I passed by rows of colorful awnings, their fabric billowing gently in the evening breeze. The remnants of the day's decorations still adorned the facades, adding a touch of whimsy to the otherwise deserted scene. Despite the absence of vendors and shoppers, the market retained its aura of enchantment. Lanterns hung from awnings and doorways, casting a warm, golden glow upon the deserted streets. The flickering flames danced in the night, casting playful shadows that seemed to come alive in the darkness. I paused before a stall adorned with strings of paper lanterns, their vibrant hues softened by the dim light. In the daylight, this stall had been a hive of activity, its owner deftly weaving intricate patterns into the delicate paper. Now it stood silent and still, a testament to the artistry that had once thrived within its walls. As I continued my journey through the deserted market, I couldn't help but marvel at the resilience of the human spirit. Despite the challenges and uncertainties of life, people had come together in this bustling marketplace, their laughter and camaraderie echoing through the streets. And even in the quiet solitude of the night, the market remained a beacon of hope and possibility. I passed by stalls selling everything from fragrant spices to handcrafted jewelry, each one a testament to the creativity and ingenuity of its owner. Though the vendors had long since retired for the evening, their presence lingered in the air, a reminder of the vibrant tapestry of life that unfolded within these walls each day. As I reached the end of the market, I turned to take one last look at the scene before me. The night had cast its spell upon the bustling streets, transforming them into a tranquil oasis bathed in moonlight. And though the market may have been closed for the night, its spirit remained alive and well, ready to awaken with the dawn of a new day. With a contented sigh, I bid farewell to the silent streets and made my way home, grateful for the fleeting glimpse into the magic of the night market. The night market exuded an aura of mystery, as if it held secrets whispered only in the quiet hours of the evening. Each alleyway I traversed seemed to conceal a story waiting to be told, a memory waiting to be unearthed. I imagined the countless souls who had walked these same streets, their hopes and dreams woven into the fabric of the market itself. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, as if unseen eyes followed my every move. Perhaps it was merely my imagination running wild in the silence of the night, but the sensation persisted nonetheless. It was as if the spirits of the market's past inhabitants lingered in the shadows, silently observing the lone wanderer who dared to tread upon their sacred ground. Despite the eeriness of the moment, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a feeling of belonging amidst the solitude. In the quiet stillness of the night, I found solace in the company of my own thoughts, allowing them to wander freely as I roamed the deserted streets. The night market held a special kind of magic, one that transcended the boundaries of time and space. It was a place where dreams took flight and possibilities were endless, a sanctuary for the weary soul seeking refuge from the chaos of the world. As I finally emerged from the labyrinth of alleyways, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness at leaving behind the enchanting world of the night market. Yet I knew that its memory would linger within me, a flickering flame of hope and wonder that would guide me through the darkness of the night. And as I made my way home, I carried with me the promise of a new day, filled with endless possibilities waiting to be discovered. Story 29. Hidden away from prying eyes, nestled deep within the heart of an overgrown garden, lay a secret greenhouse, a sanctuary of greenery bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. Its existence was known only to a select few, those who stumbled upon it by chance or were led there by whispers carried on the night breeze. As I stumbled upon this clandestine oasis, it felt as though I had stumbled into another world entirely. The entrance, concealed behind a tangle of vines and ivy, revealed itself only to those with a keen eye and a sense of adventure. Pushing aside the foliage, I stepped into the cool interior of the greenhouse, feeling as though I had entered a realm of enchantment. Moonlight filtered through the glass ceiling above, casting a silvery sheen over the lush foliage that filled the space. Exotic plants of all shapes and sizes reached towards the heavens, their leaves shimmering in the pale light, as if touched by magic. It was a scene straight out of a fairy tale, a hidden garden untouched by the passage of time. As I wandered deeper into the greenhouse, I found myself surrounded by a riot of color and scent, each plant more wondrous than the last. Tropical blooms perfumed the air with their heady fragrance, while delicate ferns unfurled their fronds in intricate patterns. It was a symphony of life, a celebration of the beauty and diversity of the natural world. In the center of the greenhouse stood a magnificent fountain, its waters shimmering in the moonlight as they cascaded down in a gentle cascade. Around its base, exotic orchids bloomed in a riot of hues, their delicate petals unfolding like works of art. It was a sight to behold, a testament to the care and dedication of whoever tended to this hidden paradise. Lost in wonder, I explored every corner of the greenhouse, marveling at the sheer variety of plants that called it home. From towering palms to delicate carnivorous vines, each species seemed more exotic and otherworldly than the last. It was a living museum of botanical wonders, a treasure trove of biodiversity hidden away from the prying eyes of the world. As I wandered, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone in this enchanted place. It was as though the very air hummed with the presence of unseen spirits, whispering secrets that only the plants themselves could hear. And indeed, as I listened closely, I fancied I could hear the faint rustle of leaves and the soft murmur of voices, as if the greenhouse itself were alive with hidden life. As the night wore on, I found myself drawn to a secluded corner of the greenhouse, where a particularly rare and exotic plant stood sentinel in the shadows. Its leaves shimmered with an otherworldly glow, casting strange patterns of light upon the surrounding foliage. Drawn by its beauty, I reached out a hand to touch its velvety petals, only to recoil in surprise as they twitched beneath my touch. Startled, I took a step back, unsure of what I had just witnessed. But as I watched, the plant seemed to come to life before my very eyes, its tendrils unfurling and reaching towards me with a gentle curiosity. It was a sight that defied explanation, a testament to the mysterious and wondrous power of nature. In that moment, I realized that this hidden greenhouse was more than just a collection of plants. It was a living, breathing entity unto itself, a testament to the resilience and beauty of the natural world. And though its existence remained a secret to all but a fortunate few, I knew that its magic would stay with me always, a reminder of the wonders that lie hidden just beyond the edges of our perception. With a sense of awe and reverence, I bid farewell to the secret greenhouse, knowing that I would carry its memory with me forever. And as I stepped back out into the cool night air, I couldn't help but feel grateful for the chance encounter that had led me to this hidden paradise, a place where the beauty of nature flourished in all its untamed glory. As I wandered, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone in this enchanted place. It was as though the very air hummed with the presence of unseen spirits, whispering secrets that only the plants themselves could hear. And indeed, as I listened closely, I fancied I could hear the faint rustle of leaves and the soft murmur of voices, as if the greenhouse itself were alive with hidden life. With each step, I felt a sense of wonder and curiosity growing within me, a longing to uncover the mysteries that lay hidden within this verdant sanctuary. As I moved deeper into the heart of the greenhouse, I found myself drawn to a secluded corner, where a particularly rare and exotic plant stood sentinel in the shadows. Its leaves shimmered with an otherworldly glow, casting strange patterns of light upon the surrounding foliage. Drawn by its beauty, I reached out a hand to touch its velvety petals, only to recoil in surprise as they twitched beneath my touch. Startled, I took a step back, unsure of what I had just witnessed. But as I watched, the plant seemed to come to life before my very eyes, its tendrils unfurling and reaching towards me with a gentle curiosity. It was a sight that defied explanation, a testament to the mysterious and wondrous power of nature. In that moment, I realized that this hidden greenhouse was more than just a collection of plants. It was a living, breathing entity unto itself, a testament to the resilience and beauty of the natural world. And though its existence remained a secret to all but a fortunate few, I knew that its magic would stay with me always, a reminder of the wonders that lie hidden just beyond the edges of our perception. With a sense of awe and reverence, I bid farewell to the secret greenhouse, knowing that I would carry its memory with me forever. And as I stepped back out into the cool night air, I couldn't help but feel grateful for the chance encounter that had led me to this hidden paradise, a place where the beauty of nature flourished in all its untamed glory. As I made my way back through the garden, the moonlight casting long shadows across the landscape, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled upon something truly extraordinary. It was as though the very earth itself had opened up to reveal a hidden realm of wonder and enchantment, a place where the boundaries between the natural world and the supernatural blurred and merged into one. Lost in thought, I retraced my steps through the tangled undergrowth, the memory of the secret greenhouse burning brightly in my mind. And though I knew that I could never truly capture the magic of that fleeting encounter, I also knew that it had changed me in ways I could scarcely comprehend. For in that hidden oasis, beneath the watchful gaze of the moon, I had glimpsed the true power and beauty of the natural world, a power that transcended mere words or explanations and spoke directly to the soul. And though I may never fully understand the mysteries that lie hidden within the heart of the greenhouse, I would forever cherish the memory of that enchanted night and the profound sense of wonder it had awakened within me. Story 30. The mountain tunnel. Walking through an old mountain tunnel, I am captivated by the echo of my steps in the cool, still air. It was a journey into the heart of the earth, a passage carved through solid rock by the hands of generations long past. As I stepped into the darkness, the outside world faded away, replaced by the quiet solitude of the underground realm. The entrance to the tunnel loomed before me, a gaping maw that swallowed the fading light of day. I hesitated for a moment, my senses alert to the unknown depths that lay beyond. But curiosity spurred me onward, beckoning me to explore the secrets hidden within the mountain's embrace. With each step, the echoes of my footfalls reverberated against the rough-hewn walls, a haunting melody that seemed to resonate with the very soul of the earth. The sound filled the cavernous space, bouncing off the stone walls and enveloping me in a symphony of sound. The air within the tunnel was cool and still, untouched by the warmth of the sun that bathed the world above. It carried with it a faint scent of earth and moss, mingling with the metallic tang of minerals leached from the surrounding rock. It was a scent that spoke of ancient secrets, of untold stories whispered in the silence of the mountain's depths. As I delved deeper into the tunnel, the darkness seemed to intensify, pressing in on me from all sides like a weight upon my shoulders. Yet there was a strange beauty to be found in the shadows, a sense of mystery that drew me further into the heart of the mountain. Occasionally, shafts of light pierced the gloom, casting ethereal patterns upon the walls and floor. They danced and flickered like elusive phantoms, teasing me with glimpses of the world outside. But they were fleeting, vanishing as quickly as they had appeared, leaving me once again enveloped in darkness. I reached out a hand to touch the cool, rough surface of the wall, tracing the grooves and fissures that marked its ancient surface. It was as if I could feel the pulse of the mountain itself, a steady rhythm that echoed through the stone and into my very bones. The tunnel twisted and turned, its path winding ever deeper into the heart of the earth. I had lost all sense of time and direction, guided only by the faint glimmer of light that beckoned me onward. It was a journey into the unknown, a voyage of discovery that promised untold treasures for those brave enough to seek them out. As I pressed forward, the echoes of my footsteps seemed to grow louder, bouncing off the walls with a renewed intensity. It was as if the mountain itself had come alive, its ancient voice reverberating through the cavernous space. I closed my eyes and listened, allowing the sound to wash over me like a tidal wave, carrying me deeper into the heart of the earth. Suddenly, I rounded a bend in the tunnel and emerged into a vast cavern bathed in the soft glow of bioluminescent fungi. The walls were alive with color, their surfaces covered in a tapestry of vibrant hues that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. It was a sight unlike anything I had ever seen, a hidden oasis hidden deep within the belly of the mountain. I stood transfixed, my breath catching in my throat as I took in the beauty that surrounded me. The air was alive with the hum of unseen creatures, their presence felt rather than seen in the shifting shadows. It was a world unto itself, a sanctuary untouched by the passage of time. As I explored the cavern, I discovered hidden pools of crystal clear water teeming with life, their depths reflecting the shimmering light from above. Strange rock formations jutted out from the walls, their twisted shapes a testament to the forces that had shaped the mountain over countless millennia. I lost myself in the beauty of the underground realm, allowing the sights and sounds to wash over me like a gentle tide. It was a world apart from the hustle and bustle of the surface, a place where time seemed to stand still in the eternal embrace of the mountain. Eventually, I tore myself away from the cavern's enchanting embrace and retraced my steps back through the tunnel. The echoes of my footsteps followed me like a ghostly escort, guiding me safely back to the world above. As I emerged into the fading light of day, I felt a sense of gratitude for the journey I had undertaken, a journey into the heart of the earth that had left an indelible mark upon my soul. Story 31. As I eased my car onto the winding country road, I felt the stresses of the day melt away like dew beneath the morning sun. The asphalt stretched out before me like a ribbon of black silk, winding its way through fields of golden wheat and emerald green pastures. The air was filled with the sweet scent of wildflowers and freshly cut grass, carried on a gentle breeze that whispered secrets of distant lands. As I drove slowly, savoring the peaceful solitude of the countryside, I couldn't help but marvel at the beauty that surrounded me. On either side of the road, trees stood tall and proud, their branches reaching towards the sky like outstretched arms. Birds flitted through the branches, their cheerful songs filling the air with melody. Occasionally, I would catch a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye, a deer bounding gracefully through the fields, or a rabbit darting into the safety of the underbrush. Each sighting filled me with a sense of wonder, a reminder of the untamed beauty that lay just beyond the edges of civilization. As I rounded a bend in the road, I spotted a small creek meandering through a grove of willow trees, its crystal clear waters shimmering in the sunlight. Without hesitation, I pulled over to the side of the road and stepped out of the car, eager to immerse myself in the tranquility of this idyllic scene. The cool water lapped gently at my feet as I made my way down to the water's edge, feeling the soft mud squelch beneath my toes. I closed my eyes and listened to the soothing sound of the creek, the gentle babbling of water against stone, a symphony of nature's own making. For a moment, I forgot about the worries and cares of the world, lost in the simple joy of being alive in this beautiful place. It was a feeling of freedom and serenity that I rarely experienced in the hustle and bustle of everyday life, a feeling that I vowed to hold on to for as long as I could. As the sun began to sink towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape, I reluctantly tore myself away from the creek and made my way back to the car. With a sense of contentment filling my heart, I resumed my journey down the country road, eager to see what other wonders the countryside had in store. As I drove, I couldn't help but marvel at the timeless beauty of the landscape unfolding before me. Rolling hills stretched out in every direction, their lush green slopes dotted with clusters of trees and the occasional farmhouse. It was a scene straight out of a painting, a pastoral paradise untouched by the passage of time. Occasionally, I would pass by a lone farmer working in the fields, his weathered face creased with lines of wisdom and experience. We would exchange a friendly wave as I drove by, a silent acknowledgement of our shared appreciation for the simple pleasures of rural life. As the miles ticked by, I found myself lost in thought, reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this moment. It had been a long and winding road, filled with ups and downs, twists and turns. But as I gazed out at the peaceful countryside unfolding before me, I realized that every bump and detour had been worth it, leading me to this place of quiet beauty and profound serenity. As the sky began to darken and the stars emerged like diamonds scattered across a velvet canvas, I knew that my time on the country road was drawing to a close. But as I prepared to return to the hustle and bustle of everyday life, I made a silent vow to myself to hold on to the peace and tranquility I had found here, and to carry it with me wherever I went. With a sense of gratitude filling my heart, I turned the car towards home, knowing that no matter where life's journey may take me, the memory of this quiet country road would always be with me, a reminder of the beauty and wonder that can be found in the simplest of moments. Story 32. The porch in a thunderstorm. Sitting on a covered porch, I watch a thunderstorm, feeling safe and mesmerized by the powerful display. It was a scene straight out of a painting, the dark clouds swirling ominously overhead, punctuated by flashes of lightning that illuminated the sky in brilliant bursts of light. The air was heavy with the scent of rain, mingling with the earthy aroma of wet grass and foliage. As I settled into the comfortable embrace of the porch swing, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a feeling of sanctuary amidst the chaos of the storm. The rhythmic patter of raindrops against the roof provided a soothing backdrop to the symphony of thunder and lightning that played out before me. I watched in awe as jagged bolts of lightning streaked across the sky, their brilliance momentarily banishing the darkness that enveloped the world. Each flash illuminated the landscape in stark relief, casting long shadows that danced and flickered in the shifting light. The thunder rumbled like a distant drumbeat, its deep resonance reverberating through the air and into my very bones. It was a sound that spoke of power and majesty, a reminder of the awesome forces that shaped the world around us. Despite the intensity of the storm, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me, as if the tumultuous energy of the thunder and lightning had been transformed into a peaceful serenity. I closed my eyes and allowed myself to be swept away by the raw beauty of the moment, losing myself in the primal dance of nature unfolding before me. The porch offered a perfect vantage point from which to observe the storm, its sturdy roof providing shelter from the elements while still allowing me to feel the cool touch of the rain on my skin. I leaned back in the swing, letting the gentle rocking motion lull me into a state of tranquility as I surrendered to the hypnotic rhythm of the storm. With each passing moment, the storm seemed to intensify, unleashing its fury upon the world with unabated force. The rain fell in torrents, drumming a steady beat against the roof and creating rivulets that cascaded down the sides of the porch. Yet, I remained undaunted, my gaze fixed unwaveringly upon the spectacle unfolding before me. As the storm raged on, I found myself drawn deeper into its embrace, my senses heightened by the electrifying energy that crackled in the air. I could feel the static charge tingling against my skin, raising the hairs on the back of my neck in anticipation of the next lightning strike. Suddenly, a particularly bright flash illuminated the sky, followed by a deafening clap of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. I gasped in awe, my heart pounding in my chest as I marveled at the sheer power of the storm. But even as I reveled in the spectacle before me, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness for those who feared the storm's wrath. For me, sitting on the porch in the midst of the tempest, I felt safe and protected, as if the world outside had ceased to exist and I was cocooned in a bubble of tranquility. I watched as the rain gradually subsided, the dark clouds parting to reveal a sliver of moonlight peeking through the night sky. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and renewed by its fury. As I sat on the porch, watching the last vestiges of the storm fade into the distance, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the experience. It was a reminder of the untamed beauty of nature, of the awe-inspiring power that lay dormant within the world around us. With a contented sigh, I rose from the porch swing and made my way back indoors, leaving the storm behind me but carrying with me the memory of its fierce beauty. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, I knew that I would forever cherish the moments spent sitting on the porch, watching the thunderstorm rage outside, feeling safe and mesmerized by the powerful display.